I hope we've all had a good bit of a break. I know it's been a bit different this year, but you're well rested. You're all sat in the comfort of your own home. We're sat here in chamber, but never mind. Okay. May I welcome
drafty, Lord Mayor?
Public to this meeting of the full council being conducted remotely, and wish you all a happy new year. Please can I ask the Director of Legal and Governance to announce the housekeeping arrangements?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Members, can I just ask if you can hear me? No, I'm struggling.
No.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. May I have your attention while I make a few announcements about how this meeting will be conducted. This meeting is a public meeting held in accordance with recent regulations which permit local authority meetings to be held by remote means. The meeting is being conducted using Zoom as the virtual platform and will be live streamed for the public to view via the Council's Public Eye webcasting site. This will mean that the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. Sheffield Live TV also plan to record and rebroadcast this meeting. To help make the meeting run as smoothly as possible, it's important that all participants in the virtual meeting room have their microphone on mute for the duration of the meeting. Please only unmute when the Lord Mayor invites you to speak. This will help reduce the scope for noise interference. May I also suggest that all the mobile phones and similar devices are switched to silent in order to remove the potential for disturbance when speaking at the meeting. Thank you in advance for your cooperation in this. May I remind members of the guidance provided to them yesterday by the clerk, Paul Robinson, that if you wish to speak at the meeting, you should use the Zoom chat facility to request to speak. You will need to indicate which item number you wish to speak on, and it's important that the message is sent to all panelists and not directly to the Lord Mayor. Paul will be monitoring the chat on the Lord Mayor's behalf, and messages sent directly to the Lord Mayor run the risk of being overlooked. Please do not use the chat facility for any other purpose. Again, thank you in advance for your cooperation. The regulations on remote meetings require that members are able to hear and be heard by, and where practicable, are able to see or be seen by other members and by members of the public. In the spirit of this, please can I ask that members keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. Members of the viewing public may see members of the council looking away from their screens at times. This is because they will need to look at an additional screen or device containing their agenda papers. May I remind members that in addition to the published agenda for the meeting, an email was sent to you by Paul Robinson earlier this morning, attaching details of proposed changes to be made to membership of council bodies and appointments to external bodies, which is to be considered under item 12 on the agenda. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Please may I give advance notice that in relation to item 8 on the agenda, which relates to the public update on coronavirus, Greg Feld, the Director of Public Health, will need to leave this meeting by 4:30 p.m. in order to represent the Association for Directors of Public Health in a call with the Chief Medical Officer. I therefore propose to commence the item as soon after 3 p.m. as possible in order to receive the usual update from the Director and provide a good allocation of time for members of the Council to ask questions of the Director for this meeting. There will be no additional presentations to be provided to the Council at the COVID-related topic. Finally, this meeting is scheduled to finish at 5:30. I propose to adjourn the meeting at one or more appropriate points through the proceedings to give members the opportunity to take a comfort break. Thank you. I have to announce at this point the the sad loss of Councillor Peter Rippon. Peter passed away on December the 20th, and his funeral will take place on Monday, the 11th of January at 12 noon at St Mary's Church, Ecclesfield. Invited mourners only. Donations in lieu of flowers suggested to go to Woodthorpe Tara Luncheon Club, I believe that says. Reason there's only going to be invited is because of the COVID pandemic, and you'll understand that there's only so many mourners allowed at the funeral service. I propose to hold a minute's silence in remembrance of Peter, and I wish to announce that tributes to Councillor Rippon will be taken at the conclusion of this meeting. So if we could all just take a minute's silence now to remember the life of Peter Rippon, Councillor Peter Rippon. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Item number 2, apologies for absence. I have apologies only for Councillor Jackie Satter. Are there any further apologies? Item 3, declarations of interest. This item of business is to enable members of the council to declare an interest in any item on the agenda. When declaring an interest, the member should refer to the item of business, state whether it's pecuniary or personal interest, and outline the reasons for the declaration. Does any member wish to declare an interest? If so, please unmute and speak. Thank you. Item number 4, appointment of a new leader. This item of business is to appoint a new leader of the council to serve for the remainder of 2020-2021 municipal year. A report of the Director of Legal and Governance on this matter has been published with the agenda for this meeting. The report contains 3 recommendations. I propose to deal with the item in 2 parts. The first part being to approve the first 2 recommendations, and the second part being to address the 3rd recommendation, which is to appoint a new leader. May I propose that the council notes that information contained in the report, in particular the resignation of Councillor Julie Dorr as leader of the council with effect from the 6th of January 2021, and determines that a new leader of the council be appointed at this meeting to serve for the remainder of the 2020-2021 municipal year. Is my motion formally seconded?
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Does any member wish to speak on the subject matter of this motion? Is that motion agreed? I will take silence as the affirmation of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. The motion is carried. We now move to the process of appointing a new leader. Are there any nominations for leader of the council? Tony, you're on mute. Councillor Dams, you're on mute.
Beg your pardon, Lord Mayor. I thought I'd unmuted. Lord Mayor, I'd like to nominate Councillor Robert Johnson.
Okay. Are there, is that nomination seconded?
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Are there any further nominations? No. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that Councillor Bob Johnson be appointed Leader of the Council for the remainder of the 2020-2021 municipal year. I shall now put that motion to the vote. Is that motion agreed? I will take silence as the affirmation of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. I declare the motion is carried and Councillor Bob Johnson has been appointed Leader of the Council for the remainder of the 2020-21 municipal year. Turn your page.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Item 5, notification of executive arrangements. This item of business is to receive the newly appointed Leader of the Council's notification of arrangements for the discharge of the Council's executive functions. Can I invite the new Leader, Councillor Johnson, to announce the name of the Deputy Leader and other Cabinet members, including their portfolio areas of responsibility, the scheme of delegation for the discharge of executive functions and any changes to the membership of the Cabinet Highways Committee? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could I possibly just say a few words before I go on to announce that regarding my appointment, with your permission, Lord Mayor? I'd just like to pay tribute to Julie as she steps down as leader today. Julie's led the city through one of the most challenging times in our history, dealing with a decade of austerity and the pandemic over the past year. She should be proud of everything that she has achieved, and I would like to thank her personally for the support and the work that we have done together, particularly in that last 18 months during my role as cabinet member. There is other things I'd like to say, but I'll use that. I'll take another opportunity to use them later on in the day if I could, Lord Mayor. But the changes to the cabinet system, there has only been one change that I announced in group earlier today, and that will be that Julie Grocott should stand in the position of Transport and Development Cabinet Member. All of the changes are just me replacing Julie Dore on external bodies, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I propose that the Council notes the information reported to the meeting by the newly appointed Leader of the Council. Is that agreed? I will take silence as the affirmation of the meeting. Thank you. The information is noted. Item 6, public questions and petitions. Public questions can be asked and petitions can be presented at council meetings. Questions or petitions need to be submitted 2 clear days in advance of these remote meetings to allow time for myself as the chair of the meeting to decide how any petitions and questions received are to be presented at the meeting and for invitees to attend the meeting to be issued. There are 60 minutes allowed in total for ordinary petitions and public questions. For this meeting, there are no petitions to be presented, but questions from 8 members of the public have been received by the submission deadline. At the appropriate time, the host of the meeting will bring speakers into the virtual meeting room to enable them to ask their questions. Once a public speaker has spoken and received a response from the relevant cabinet member, the host will then return them to the virtual public gallery. Please can Martin McKirvey, Chair of the Sheffield Property Association, be admitted to the virtual meeting room.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, can you ask your question, Mr. McKirvey, please?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. My question is perhaps not a conventional one. It is perhaps one which seeks to capture and recognise the significance and importance of leadership and service and to say thank you for both. I speak in my roles as chair of the Sheffield Property Association, the only property association in the country outside of London, and as chair of the Castlegate Partnership, and also as someone who's been involved in our business community for the last 30 years. Leadership in any organisation involves the capacity to translate vision into reality. For almost 10 years, Councillor Dorr has led our City Council. As she steps down from that role, I want to say a few words of thanks on behalf of the business community in our city. Her leadership, help and support has always been offered and delivered in a spirit of public and private sector partnership and collaboration. Whether it was through the workings of the City Growth Board or in response to the global pandemic with the creation of the COVID-19 Business Response Group, or articulating the voice of Sheffield within the city region, or working with Transport for the North, Councillor Dorr's intentions and actions have always been to work with and for our businesses, helping and wanting to build a fairer, stronger, greener and more beautiful Sheffield. We in the business community greatly value the importance of working in partnership with our town hall, and we want to build on the work that Councillor Dorr has done. We are absolutely committed to working with Councillor Johnson, the new leader, and with Kate Josephs, the new chief executive. And if I may, I would like to extend, on behalf of the business community, our congratulations to both of them, and in particular to extend a warm welcome to Kate. I would like to ask and invite those present at this meeting to please join me as I express the thanks and gratitude of the business community in Sheffield for everything that Councillor Dorr has done to help our city. Julie, thank you. We wish you a healthy and happy retirement. You fully deserve that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McKervey. Can I call upon Councillor Bob Johnson, Leader of the Council, to respond, please?
Thank you, Martin, and Happy New Year to you. And thank you for your question on behalf of the business community. I know both you and Councillor Dorr have worked together over a long period, particularly when you were both members of the LEP and the region's Transport for the North, which developed the One North proposal and an integrated rail network across the north of England, including 30-minute city centre connectivity between Sheffield, Leeds and Manchester Triangle that led to the development of HS3. On transport, Julie has also worked with the business community on the project to relocate HS2 from its original proposed Meadow Hall site to the city centre, creating both extra jobs and economic growth for the city. As part of this work on HS2, she has served as a member of the government's HS2 Growth Task Force. She has hosted a meeting of the National Infrastructure Commission and in Sheffield spoke at a number of events advocating the benefits that HS2 could bring to Sheffield and the region. I'm sure you don't need me to say any more. Some of the other key issues Julie has worked on in partnership with the business community, including the city centre regeneration, Heart of the City and other projects that we are developing, alongside some of our partners such as World Snooker, and playing an important role in keeping that event in the city and working with the Business Improvement District. Julie has also worked with the business community on supporting Sheffield's devolution deal, which has been an important project for them, and an economic project such as the Olympic Legacy Park. So I would definitely join you, and I hope others will, in thanking Julie for the work she has done with the businesses and much more. And thank you all for coming to this meeting to recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Mr. McKervey, and thank you, Councillor Julie Dorr, for your leadership in the past. Can Mr. McKervey now please return to the public gallery? Thank you. Please can Graham Turnbull be admitted to the virtual meeting room? You there, Mr. Turnbull?
Yes, I am. Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Please can you ask your question? Thank you.
Yes, in December 2018, I brought a petition to council asking for safe school streets to be trialed in Sheffield, and they were. And I would like to take this time to thank the council and all the people that have worked on the trialing of those schemes. So my question is, will 2021 be the year that we finally roll out safe school street schemes, and how many schools can we expect to see rolled out? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. May I call upon now then, this is the new...
It's me, Tony.
Is it you that's going to
Yeah.
answer? Okay, Councillor Johnson. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you as well, Graham. Good
Happy
to
New
see
Year.
you again. Yeah, we've completed initial assessment of those 10 school street type projects. And the aspiration of these is for them to be delivered in 2021. Obviously, notwithstanding any restrictions that we may face and difficulties that may bring up. The schools are located across the city and associated schemes are all individually tailored to suit that location. These designs are currently undergoing a review, considering the feasibility and implications of the various options. It should be noted that the schemes of this nature can only really be implemented with the full support of the school and the local community, and to involve a great deal of consultation and planning before that goes ahead. And obviously that's been one of the reasons that we've struggled. That consultation is key to this. Council resources have also been stretched, as you can imagine, but our hope and aspiration is to deliver those schemes within 2021, if that's of any reassurance to you, Graham. And thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Please can Graham be returned to the public gallery? Thank you. Please can Russell Johnson be admitted to the virtual meeting room? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Johnson, you there?
Can you hear me, people?
I thought you said Alfie. Just a minute, Mr. Johnson.
I think Jill was mentioning
Jill.
on the third one, Mr. Johnson.
Can you hear me now, Lord Mayor?
Yeah, just bear with me, Mr. Johnson. I'll be with you in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Before I ask you to ask your questions, can I just ask you about question 3? It says injunction cost monies now not known to have been illegitimately extracted from the campaigners. Are you prepared to withdraw that part of the question?
Well, if you're laying that down as a...
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you're laying that down as a condition of asking the question, then I'm prepared to withdraw the suggestion that the injunction was not sound and therefore the costs were illegitimately extracted. Yes, I will withdraw that.
Thank you. Thank you. So would you like to ask your other 3 questions, Mr. Johnson, please?
I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. Congratulations and best wishes to Councillor Bob Johnson on taking the council leadership. I truly hope and expect that this marks a new dawn of enlightened and intelligent local government, something we sorely need in Sheffield. Question 1, and I've headed this, improving local democracy. Will Councillor Johnson, as the new leader, commit to implementing a modern committee system for the council before he is forced to do that by the vote in May? Does he agree with me that this move would enhance accountability and reduce the tribal character that the council has shown in recent years, thus helping to rehabilitate Labour in the local Labour in the eyes of the public? Question 2. I've headed this, it's a question, an honest, open and compunctious council, question mark. Will the new leader bravely seize the opportunity created by the regime change to initiate a meaningful process without fear or favour to uncover the whole truth about the street tree scandal? And I must say that giving the usual answer in terms of the street tree strategy and the archive, both of which are very welcome, do not answer the question. Thirdly and finally, and I've headed this one, Again, it's a question, rebuilding Sheffield's reputation. And this is the city as a whole rather than the ruling Labour group. Will the council, under the new leadership, take the bold step of placing the injunction costs monies, and here I'm removing the clause which we mentioned earlier, placing those monies in a new tree planting fund to be focused on wards with a high level of deprivation? I believe that this move would go some way to redefining the council's position on peaceful protest against injustice, in keeping with fine Labour Party tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. May I call upon Councillor Bob Johnson, Leader of the Council, to respond, please?
And Happy New Year to you, Mr. Johnson, as well. I'll try and take your questions in order. As you will be aware, Councillor Terry Fox, alongside the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, led on this work and also carried out the Big City conversation. I will obviously be looking at all the issues raised in this about how the council engages, makes decisions and is in fact accountable. I understand that there was a lot of consensus on this work about what we can do and how we can make improvements. Yeah, it is possible to improve on perfection. Though this work, and I see that Councillor Fox and other colleagues will be taking forward these ideas in the future. Question 2, local government ombudsman has conducted an inquiry, as you're aware. In addition, so has the Forestry Commission. The council published a document which was entitled Review of Tree Investigations, Lessons Learnt and Actions, which sets out how the council has learnt lessons and the extensive work over the past 2.5 years to develop a new approach, including a new street strategy, developed jointly with several partners, including STAG. The Lessons Learned document sets out 10 specific lessons learned and 14 actions that have been taken to improve practice for the future. There is also an archive project being set up, which you referred to earlier, to ensure that all relevant information is available in the public domain. If, having gone through that archive, there are any further specific questions that remained unanswered about this issue, I personally will be happy to meet with you and answer those. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Can Mr. Johnson be taken back into the virtual, out of the virtual meeting room, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Please, wait a minute. Please can Sophie Thornton be admitted to the virtual meeting room? Yeah. Hello, Sophie, you there? Are you there, Sophie?
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and
hello.
Happy New Year.
Would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, my question pertains to the increasing waiting times that council tenants are facing. I think we all know that and appreciate the difficulties that this pandemic has created, as well as appreciating the hard work of repairs staff. This is a time where we're all spending a lot more time at home. We're appreciative of our home's warmth and security, but this isn't the case for everyone, where there are cases of flooded blocks left unrepaired for 10 months, tenants with a newborn baby having to move out because their unrepaired roof left it freezing, and at a time of mental health problems increasing, delays to boarded up windows being repaired and restoring residents' natural light. I was a student for 5 years and I've experienced quite a few dodgy landlords in that time. Tenants whose dodgy landlords don't fix their properties often turn to the council for support. But the question is that for some tenants on Batemore and Jordanthorpe are asking me, is who do you turn to when in their opinion, the council is acting like one? Despite challenges which are experiences shared by other local authorities, Barnsley have maintained an average repair time of 9 days. Rotherham have a 28-day target and more than meet that target. And Harrogate's average waiting time from February to October has gone from 12.49 days to 11.72. So I asked the council, why are we now at an average of a 57-day wait? What makes Sheffield different? Can the council apologise and explain to its residents left behind waiting why its repairs waiting times are so far behind the rest of the region?
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. May I call upon Councillor Paul Wood, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods and Community Safety, to respond, please?
Yes, thank you for the question, Sophie, and a Happy New Year to you. our emergency repairs, I mean, there's obviously lots of different strands to the repair service, but the emergency repairs, we do get out to within 4 hours if there is a major breakdown and it's classified as such. If it's an urgent repair, it's still attended to within 24 hours. We have 25-day time span on normal planned repairs, but some of the work in progress repairs does go to 55 days. Now, these times have come down significantly over the last 12 months to where we were 12 months ago. And I would hope that they're going to come down even further. But obviously, COVID does put some restrictions, and the repair service are restricted by what the management group of the council classifies as safe working practices, and that has affected us to some extent. And some programme work that was not allowed to go ahead in the first lockdown, which did cause some delays, is now being allowed to go ahead in this lockdown. So we shouldn't see the problems that we did have. It is worth bearing in mind we do up to 10,000 repairs a month. And occasionally we do have a problem where the odd one isn't necessarily done to the level that we would like. But if we look at 99% of our repairs, they are done in line with the national standards and what we expect to be achieved. With the implementation of the new technical systems that have gone into the repair service, which are currently being deployed at the moment, that should also speed up things. So if anyone has waited, I sincerely apologise. If you want to send me the case, I will always look at anything any resident or councillor passes through to me. And I think the councillors across the spectrum will say that if I get a call, I do look into it straight away. So if you have a specific case of someone that has gone beyond those levels that we set, then please get in touch and I will take it up and get back to you on that. And thank you for your question, Sophie.
Thank you, Paul. You mentioned that they have been going down, but they've gone from 26 to 57 days since February to October. But thank you for your question, for your answer even.
Thank you. Please can Sophie be returned to the public gallery? Please can Isabel O'Leary be admitted to the virtual meeting room? Yeah. Are you there, Isabel? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Are you there? Hello. Could
Hello.
you ask a question, please?
Yes, thanks. I'm afraid it's another question about the Streets Ahead contract. I know you're all fed up with it, and this is quite a specific question, but it is fairly significant. So the question is, were there any unavoidable financial losses to Sheffield City Council if Amy did not carry out the tree felling programme, as it was called in other legal communications, pursuant to Service Standard 6.38 or any other part of the Streets Ahead contract? And if there were financial losses, could you specify what relevant clause? Thank you.
Thank you. May I call upon Councillor Mark Jones, Cabinet Member for Environment, Street Scene and Climate Change, to respond, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and Happy New Year, Miss O'Leary. I hope you had a good Christmas break. You're quite right, this is quite a detailed question. I'm not particularly familiar with clause Service Standard 6.38, so I have asked officers to arrange to investigate this for me and give me a full briefing. When I've gone through that process, I'll supply you with a written answer. And I'm sure that we'll be able to converse as to the content of that answer and investigate this further. So I'll get back to you as quickly as I can on that one. It may take a while because it is quite specific, and I don't know the full extent and complexities of this at this stage. So please bear with us, but I will get back to you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Please can Isabel be returned to the public gallery? Okay. Please can Justin Buxton be a meeting room? Thank you. 3. All right, Mr. Buxton, are you there? Hello? Mr. Buxton? Having technical problems again, this guy. I think we had this last time, the last meeting with Mr. Buxton. Oh, are you there?
Hello?
Hello,
Yeah.
Mr. Buxton.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're here this time. Sorry, we missed you last time. I think your internet dropped out or something at the last meeting. Was that right?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just before you start, Mr. Buxton, I should mention that we'll not take question 3 as it refers to and concerns a named former officer of the council. So you're quite at liberty to ask 1, 2, and 4. And when you're ready, if you want to go ahead with that, thank you very much.
Okay, that's very interesting that you've declined me asking question 3. We will have further discussion about that, I'm sure. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy New Year to everyone. Now, only three brief questions. Why did the leader of the council specifically state, when asked by the presiding judge, that she was happy with the council's attempt to imprison residents pursuant to a civil injunction previously granted, when all the council needed to do was implement an excusing clause to the Streets Ahead contract at no cost to the city? Second question, what was the total net cost to the council of all legal action, evidence gathering, and any other associated costs related in any way to all actions related to the civil injunction Sheffield City Council obtained from Justice Males at Leeds Crown Court, including all subsequent committal proceedings? This would include any other associated costs related to each case, as mentioned above. Question 4, as question 3 has been vetoed. Councillor Lodge has previously stated on record on March the 3rd, 2017, that clause 19.1 of the Streets Ahead contract was effectively overridden by another clause or clauses in the contract. Please specify and provide the clauses or clause to which he was referring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Can I call upon Councillor Mark Jones, Cabinet Member for Environment, Street Scene and Climate Change, to respond, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and Happy New Year, Mr. Buxton. I hope you're keeping well. With regard to question number 1, questions about court proceedings have been asked before and answered previously by Councillor Dorr. As such, I would like to take this opportunity to simply refer you to those previous answers. Councillor Dorr and myself have and continue to work with campaigners and other stakeholders groups to find solutions to issues regarding street tree retention. We have a new street tree working strategy, one co-produced with partners, and we are working to adopt and implement learning and recommendations from the consultative process. We face many challenges as we look to retain and renew our city's tree stock to preserve the public realm that we can all benefit from. With regards to question 2, I've not got the costs available to me, and I've asked officers to investigate this and get me a figure, and I'll provide a written answer to you on the costs. With regards to question 4 and the clause 19.1, I'm aware of 19.1, but I'm not aware as to any other clause. And again, I've asked officers to investigate. As I'm sure you can appreciate, this may take me a wee while to get done, but I hope to be able to keep you updated on this as it goes along. I'm not aware of the background to this one at this particular stage, but I do hope that we'll be able to get resolution and clarity on this incident as soon as possible. Given the lockdown and national procedures that we are in, it may be best if we look to arrange a Zoom or other contact at some stage to discuss these later. But I hope you'll appreciate I'm not trying to avoid the answers, are just some of the complexities here, and because of the current difficulties we face with the lockdown, we'll have to do things remotely. But thank you for the question, Mr. Buxton, and I'll get back to you on that as soon as I can.
Thank you. Please can Mr. Buxton be returned to the public gallery? Please can Curtis Crossland be admitted to the virtual meeting room, please? Okay. Okay, Mr. Crossland. Oh, you're there. Right. Please, can you ask your question, please? Questions.
Yep. Firstly, Happy New Year, Lord Mayor, and to all the councillors. So in December, I was pleased to see that 10 months after submitting the petition for a crossing on Station Road in Halfway, the Cabinet has agreed to a feasibility study. So my questions are, firstly, when will the feasibility study take place? Also, can I add to this that we're likely to be in some sort of COVID restrictions or lockdown for a number of months now. So the study needs to take this into account. Traffic will be lower at the moment, but it isn't usually. Secondly, will the results of the study be publicly available, and do we know when yet? And finally, as you'll all be aware, I've questioned the then Cabinet member Bob Johnson on this at almost every council meeting since presenting the petition. And while it's moving slower than I'd like, it is moving forward. So firstly, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Bob Johnson on his election as leader, and of course, Julie Grocott on her election to the Cabinet. But because of this, I'd like reassurance that the new Cabinet member will also support the petition for a crossing on Station Road, as the then Cabinet member Bob Johnson has done. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Bob Johnson, Leader of the Council, to respond? And maybe if Councillor Julie...
I'll cover this off, Lord Mayor. It's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you as well, Curtis. It's good to see you back again. If I can take your questions in order. Officers are in the process of evaluating the potential for that formal crossing on Station Road, as you're aware, and that work is ongoing. I've asked personally for the results of that study to come back to me, and I've asked for that by the end of January. I'll then decide whether it's made public or not. It's not normally something that we would publish. However, if there is interest, I'm sure local councillors and local MP will be able to disseminate that information amongst members of the general public. And as far as the incoming Cabinet member is concerned, the new Cabinet member, Julie Grocott, will work with the current Cabinet system. Decisions are not made in isolation from the rest of the Cabinet and will be a collective decision. So thank you for your question, Mr. Crossland, and I will, again, like to reassure you that you will be made aware as soon as a decision has been made, together with the rest of the local population. But thank you again for coming along and asking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Please can Mr. Crossland be returned to the public gallery? And please can Ruth Hubbard be admitted to the virtual meeting room? Okay. Are you there, Ruth?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, hello, hello. Right, can you ask your questions, please?
I can. Thank you. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody. Despite the ongoing coronavirus situation, I'm also dismayed we enter yet another year under this ruling group's extreme strong leader governance with its 9.7% electoral mandate. And I genuinely look forward to this council working with citizens, even at this late stage, to that citizens' agenda for more democracy in our city. I have 3 questions. In November's full council meeting, the former leader responded to a member of the public presenting a petition about free school meals and asking for greater collaboration by delivering what I thought was a quite extraordinary attack on that member of the public. And she was egged on by at least one other member of the ruling group. Whilst this was not the first time the former leader was rude or, in my view, aggressive in responding to members of the public, the attempt to belittle and humiliate this member of the public was, I thought, particularly nasty and bullying. To be clear and to ensure that councillors are aware of the impact of such behaviour, rather than adopt a Priti Patel non-awareness stance. I should say that many members of the public are nervous before asking questions because the leader was known for responding in a hostile way. As a result, the anteroom at the town hall before full council, where public questioners are asked to gather in ordinary times, was frequently something of a support group for members of the public, sometimes attending the town hall for the first time or from far-flung parts of the city, because they knew what might be coming. In November's full council, the leader was actually called out by 2 public questioners for her behaviour. Can I ask what action the monitoring officer or others took following the November full council in response to this bullying incident? My second question is, in recent months, the former leader ruled out a public inquiry into the street tree scandal in Sheffield. Given that the former leader was likely herself to be a main subject of the inquiry, how is it possible that the decision on this could be made by her, given the clear conflict of interest involved? How has that been dealt with? And I note that the monitoring officer, who might normally step in to deal with this clear conflict, is herself likely also to be a key subject for an inquiry. And my third question is, one of the key reasons members of the public ask questions at full council is in order to ensure there is a public record of answers given. Frequently, people are told they will be responded to in writing. As frequently, members of the public return to say they have not received an answer in writing. I've often been told I will receive an answer in writing, but I don't think I've ever received such a letter, apart from this morning, which I presume is a response to my September council question, because it was known I was asking this question today. So will the council consider a follow-up mechanism to ensure that where written replies are committed to, that these are completed? And like other councils do, in the absence of other reasons why information is confidential, will the council ensure that these answers are made public in council minutes, given that the reason for asking is often precisely to ensure that the answers are made on public record? Thank you.
Thank you. May I call upon Councillor Bob Johnson, Leader of the Council, to respond, please?
No problem at all, Lord Mayor, and thank you, and Happy New Year to you as well, Mrs Hubbard. I'm glad you can come along. I'd like to personally welcome public questions and petitions. I know that goes for everybody, certainly in our party. Members of the public must always be encouraged to raise their questions and hold elected representatives to account, whatever the issue. Public petitions and questions are just one of the many ways of seeing local democracy in action. But I believe it is a space for legitimate public concern and should be free of cynical political opportunism. Especially now, I don't think the people of Sheffield want to see time being wasted on political opportunism. We've got bigger things to be looking at, and everybody's mind is everywhere else. The context in which I want to answer your question is, back in October, councillors in Sheffield made the commitment to provide free school meals to children over half term. and I assume this is the questioner that you were relating to, after the government shamefully refused to do so and made a commitment to do the same for the Christmas break too. The Liberal Democrats were aware of this, and yet their council candidate for Mosborough Ward presented a petition calling for this to try and make political capital out of the free school meals issue. It was not a constructive opposition, but an attempt to try to get political mileage from an issue by posing as a legitimate public question, when in fact it was done for political reasons. I know this to be the case because we have on video Councillor Shafak Mohammed, Sheffield's Liberal Democrat leader, on video saying as such. I can quote him verbatim, but we will, in the interests of democracy, make that video available publicly, and hopefully that should be going around now. I think it's disgraceful, essentially, that the Lib Dems openly admit to using public petitions and questions and the issue of free school meals to gain political advantage. This is why I believe Councillor Dorr and other members responded with such annoyance to Mr Crossland's disingenuous petition. He was asking the question as a Lib Dem candidate for Mosborough and put up to do so by Councillor Mohammed. I don't think the issue of free school meals should be weaponised, or to try to use any of that for political point scoring. That's something that I am really keen. If we're going to work together, we need to work together. It's not about petty point scoring. I thank you, Ruth, for raising this issue, and I'm happy that you've given me an opportunity to set that record straight. And like I say, I will copy you into that video so you can see for yourself what really is going on. In respect to your other questions, in addition to that, should you still feel the need, any complaints about member behaviour are dealt with via the standards complaints process. This information is personal and therefore treated with confidence. Standards fall within the remit of Audit and Standards Committee, and a report is produced annually summarising the number and outcome of complaints. On your question on ruling out the tree inquiry, lawfully a decision to embark on a public inquiry is one for the council's executive to make, taking into consideration whether the public's interest would outweigh the potential cost. The leader, as the chair of the council's executive, has been clear that the council has apologised and has taken steps to remedy any mistakes made. Schedule of questions on coming back to people with written answers. A schedule of questions and petitions received from members of the public and answers provided by cabinet members are now published on the council's website, and an agenda and documents for each of the council meetings. At that meeting, it's recorded in the minutes or that a written response was provided, and a copy of that response will be included in that schedule. There is a schedule of questions, petitions and responses for the council meetings in March, October, November and December 2020. I do have examples, but I can't forward them on to you now for obvious reasons. There is also a follow-up mechanism now in place to help make and ensure that members of the public do receive those answers in writing when promised, and will be done so wherever appropriate. Anybody not receiving a written response could quite easily contact me, and I'll ensure that that does happen. And thank you again, Ruth, for your questions.
Thank you.
Lord Mayor, some comments were made about myself there which are incorrect. Can I say for the record, the petition that was started was before the council made the announcement for the school meals, because people remember that the government said they won't do school meals. The petition said if the government doesn't do it, the Sheffield City Council should do October and Christmas. Sorry to be personally attacked on this, Bob Johnson. It's not a great start, Bob.
Sorry.
There's going to be a new chapter.
Yeah, it will be a new chapter, but you know what you did, and we'll all be able to see that video. And then we can have a discussion. In fact, we could have a public discussion on whether you did it or you didn't.
Absolutely.
I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy to have that debate tomorrow, Shafak. Thank you.
Yeah,
can I say my interest?
My
interest was the governance issues, not the school meals issue.
Please, can Ms Hubbard be returned to the public gallery? Thank you. That concludes this item of business. Item number 7, members' questions. There is no members' questions in January, but I have a couple of urgent questions, questions to say on urgent business. And the first one is from Councillor Mayor Richards, Is Councillor Richards there? Yes, can you ask your question, please?
Gosh, sorry, that was really quick, and I just need to find the question that I asked to make sure I ask it properly. Basically, it was saying that with the closure of schools, we were concerned, certainly in my ward, about the digital divide and the lack of digital connectivity as well as hardware for all the school students who are now having to learn from home, and wanted to ask what the council was doing in order to make sure that, one, students have got the hardware, the kit, but also the bit that's far more difficult for them, how we make sure they have connectivity when so many of them are either on pay-as-you-go contracts or just don't have access to Wi-Fi broadband in the first place. So that was my question for Councillor Abtisam Mohammed.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Abtisam Mohammed in, Councillor Angela Argencio, does that question, Councillor Argencio, relate to the same as yours, or would you like to ask your question as well?
It does, but it depends on how it's answered. So can I ask mine as well, and then it can be answered together?
Yes,
because
go ahead then.
It is a very similar. So my question was, thank you, Lord Mayor. My question was, following the closure of schools on Tuesday, has Sheffield Council undertaken an audit to ensure that all children entitled to support are being provided with laptop, tablets and internet connections to help children and families access remote education? If not, what action will they be taking to ensure that children from disadvantaged backgrounds aren't disproportionately affected by the latest closure?
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Abtisam Mohammed to respond, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy New Year to everybody. Well, thank you to Councillor Shoned Richards and Councillor Angela Argencio on the questions. I think they're both really timely and important in light of the sudden changes that we find ourselves in, and students now learning from home. I think we recognise, as Councillor Shoned Richards has said, that this isn't just about hardware, but it's about connectivity and digital inclusion in areas where we know that many families will be struggling to ensure that their children have access to remote learning, because of either lack of connectivity, but also perhaps sharing devices among siblings as well. So we know that the government has offered laptops to schools, but this has been really slow, extremely slow to get off the ground. And we've had many complaints from schools that it can take months for an order to materialise. And we know that this isn't good enough. So students shouldn't face inequitable access. So I fully agree with the questioners that learning shouldn't be about a result of access or having access to appropriate tools that they need. Everyone should be in an equitable place. So I want to reassure both colleagues that are asking the question that we are working really hard to address this issue, and we're trying to do this as fast as we possibly can, given the status that students are in. We want to make sure that children from disadvantaged backgrounds in particular are not disproportionately impacted by the closure. And we're working with colleagues from Learn Sheffield to carry out an audit really quickly with schools. They're doing that this week to establish what the current demand is in terms of need out there. And we'll be working with the business sector, the campaign Laptop for Kids, which has done some really good work in ensuring donations are made to schools as well. So this isn't just about hardware, this is just as important about connectivity and inclusion there. Once we've got the audit established and we fully know where we are in terms of what the demand is, we'll hopefully be in a position to confirm our commitment to address this. And so we're looking perhaps towards the end of this week, early next, for us to address the points. I hope that answers the questions that have been asked, but keep an eye out. We'll be confirming something in the near future. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Abtisam, and thank you for the questions. We now go on to item 7.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, can I just ask a very short, quick question regarding that? I mean, taking into account the fact that we've known since May, June that there would be a second wave and the schools were closed in the spring, Why are we waiting to now to do the audit? Why have we not been prepared from September when schools went back or the summer?
I can respond to that,
or
Lord.
has there already been an
Yeah, I can respond to that. That's fairly straightforward. The initial issue that we had, the audit was done from last year, so we've got an indication of where we were with students' demand from last year. However, it's very different having bubbles sent home with smaller groups of students to all students going home, because in addition to the barrier of not having any device, there's the additional issue of having siblings that have to share devices as well, that perhaps have got additional need. So it's a greater need than it was in September. So the discussions that we're having with schools now is trying to establish, well, how does the new demand of all students being at home impact on students? So we don't want to see families that have got several students in secondary schools or primary be disadvantaged by the fact that they may only have one device, which would have been very, very different in September than it is now, because everybody's at home doing that distance learning.
Thank you. I wouldn't normally allow further questions on this, supplementary, should I say, but being as I've allowed Angela the one, I'll allow you just the one, Councillor Richards.
It was more of a comment, just to say, for instance, Pipworth School, where I'm a governor, they've already done their audit. So can I just ask that all councillors who are either governors or have schools in their wards, please check the progress of it for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 7.2, questions on joint authorities. This item of business is to provide an opportunity for members to ask questions on the discharge of the functions of the South Yorkshire Joint Authorities for Fire and Rescue and Pensions. Does any member wish to ask a question? If so, please unmute and speak.
Lord Mayor, can I please ask a question around fire and rescue, please?
Go ahead.
So I appreciate Tony Dams might not be able to provide, won't be able to provide an answer straight away, but I just want to pass these on. So residents of North Bank Flats were evacuated shortly before Christmas after a fire service inspection deemed the flats not fit to live in. Why did it take so long for North Bank's fire safety issues to be treated so seriously? Issues to do with North Bank were known for years before. Are we confident that other flats in Sheffield with similar known fire safety issues, such as cladding, are fit for human habitation? How can we be sure, given the time it took to declare North Bank unfit for humans, that those flats with known fire safety issues are fit for human habitation? And how are flats with known fire safety issues in Sheffield being supported? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to respond, Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. You're right, I can't answer all of that question. And if you could email me the question, I'll get a proper answer to it. But the reason things are taking so long now is that we've got a duty to inspect, or the fire service has got a duty to inspect certain buildings. There are 180 buildings in Sheffield on that list, and they're going through them as quickly as they can. And up to now, the last report I had, we'd inspected 59 of the 180. And it is a problem. They are going as fast as they can, but to do a proper inspection, you need to be thorough. But it's a question that I'm sure everybody would support needing an answer to. And apart from that, just brief overview. If you text me, email me the question, I'll get you a proper answer. And I'll get it via Kate and ask her to circulate all councillors. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Dams, for that. I'm now going to adjourn for a comfort break. We're back here for 3:15 on the dot, because I want to bring in the Director of Public Health next. Thank you. Good. Could you please ensure that you either that you mute yourselves, because the live streaming is still live, even though you may not think it is. So if you just put yourselves on mute to ensure that anything you say is not overheard, anything you say that you shouldn't want to be overheard, should I say? Okay, thank you.
Tony, I have left you a message to say I need to leave right now for a personal matter. Okay. And I've sent it to all the panelists. All right. All the best. Bye-bye.
Yes, okay, Julie, thank you.
Who's left the mic on? You're making a right noise.
Gary, you did that without moving your lips.
It's not you, Adam, is it?
No, I keep on muting myself.
Yes, please. Yeah. Item 8 we're on, aren't we?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Greg's there. I can see Greg.
Yeah, good.
I can see Greg. We all coming back gradually now. How many have we got? 9. Okay, I think we're back. What I'd like to do now is to move on to item 8, the coronavirus COVID-19 update. I shall now invite Greg Fell, Director of Public Health, to provide an update on the latest position in relation to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. This will be followed by an opportunity for members of the council to ask questions. If any member wishes to ask a question, may I remind them that they need to request to do so via the Zoom chat facility, sending their messages to all panelists. May I also remind members of my earlier statement that the Director needs to leave this meeting shortly before 4:30. Thank you. Greg.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy New Year, all. This is the first situation update of 2021. I suspect there will be one or two more. I'll hope to keep those to a minimum. A fairly short and snappy update from me today. There's about 12 slides, mostly epidemiology, a little bit on the strategy. To cut to the chase, the strategy is largely unchanged, and then a little bit on crystal ball gazing with regard to the future, and some hot issues of the moment, which will continue to be hot into the future. So I shall start with the epidemiology. Firstly, mobility. This is either the Apple or the Google mobility data. I forget which offhand, actually. I think it's the Google data. So if you have a Google phone in your pocket, you'll monitor where you go. We're now a year in. The first UK cases of coronavirus were late January from memory. And the first human-to-human transmission obviously was in Wuhan in mid-December 2019. So we're a year into this, and this is the mobility data. Over the course of the last year, most obviously there was a huge drop-off in mobility during the March lockdown 1. Mobility obviously went gradually back up and came down when significant restrictions were imposed on most of the country from October onwards. It remains to be seen what will happen. You can see it's for both walking, driving and public transport, it's a good bit lower than the baseline now. It remains to be seen what will happen for the future, but the disease still circulates, and the rates of transmission are going up, not down, sadly. So second slide is the epidemic curve over the course of the pandemic. This is the whole course of the pandemic from about February onwards, actually. And the key national policy interventions are annotated in the graph. You can see the shape of the curve for yourself. I won't dwell on that. There was a significant rise in September, October. Restriction, the tiering system was imposed towards the middle to end of October from memory. And this is when Sheffield entered Tier 3, 24th of October. I remember it very well. National restrictions, aka lockdown 2. And then national restrictions ended and Sheffield re-entered Tier 3. So looking at this bit of the graph forward, there was the rates came down significantly from the entry to Tier 3 in October. I think we got to a place where they were flatlining from mid-December forwards, probably got to a space where we'd reached the limits of what Tier 3 could do for us. And since then, rates have started to go back up. And you can see they're rising, not hugely steeply, but certainly rising. And I expect that trend will continue for the foreseeable future, sadly. Currently, this is a little bit out of date. Currently, the rate, the seven-day incidence per 100,000 is in the order of 230 per 100,000. So that's a little bit out of date, and you should ignore that little drop off at the very edge of the graph. That's just to do with the data lag. So the pattern in South Yorkshire is largely similar. This is data from mid-October for each of the 4 local authorities to the end of December. You can see the fall, you can see the flat line to slight rise in each of the 4 areas of South Yorkshire. The pattern is largely the same. You'll all have noticed that there is a new variant of the virus. It emerged in mid-December. It emerged in Kent. It spread very rapidly. It's worth saying, and again, this is well reported nationally, so it won't be any news to you. It is significantly more transmissible. Significantly more transmissible. There's really no compelling evidence at all that it's more dangerous, more pathogenic to individuals. However, because it's more transmissible, more people will get it, and as a result, there will be more net harm. But if you look at the, I'll not show the data for speed, but if you look at the shape and speed of the epidemic curve, say in Kent and or London, it's going up like that, and there's a significant proportion of the B117 variants in Kent and London. The geographical challenge, Sheffield is here. Roughly 25% of the illness, the COVID-19 test that we genotype, are the B117 variant. That was about 10% a couple of weeks ago. I think that will continue to go up. At the moment, it's principally the southeast of England, with the obvious notable exception of northern Cumbria. That won't last for very long, sadly. I wish I could tell you that we would maintain that, but we might. The lockdown may curtail the spread of the variants, and I don't know that, but that it is a significant worry, so that it remains to be seen how that one will play out. But it will significantly increase the spread, as lots of southeast of England and London have seen. The epidemiology across England is very, very different. This is the epidemiology. So the weekly case rate per 100,000 by each of the age groups, I think in 10-year age bands, for each of 9 parts of the country. Yorkshire and Humber is here. You can see, and the x-axis is the same for all of the graphs. The rates are lower in Yorkshire. For once, we are at the leading edge of the pack, or the good end of the pack. And relatively flat. Compare here to London. I don't need to explain the difference. That will probably have implications for what the epidemiology will look like after it finishes, and I don't know when that will be. the lockdown will achieve the intended result of the lockdown, the suppression of spread of the virus and the significant reduction of the weekly case rate. Because we have, relatively speaking, we have too high a case rate, but relatively speaking, much lower. You can see in some parts of London case rates of 1,200 per 100,000. Here we're in the order of let's call it 250 per 100,000. We will have a much lower case rate at the end of lockdown, and that has interesting implications in terms of the strategy that we may pursue at the end of the lockdown. Back to Sheffield, 7-day incidence trend since December. Two graphs there. One is the over 60s, the group that I worry about most, the group that are most likely to be severely impacted, the most likely to be hospitalized, and most likely to sadly die. It is trending upwards, not steeply upwards, but it's certainly trending upwards, and there's no two ways about that. If I took that graph back further into October, September, October, and into November, it'd been coming down, actually, coming down, but this is more recent data. It flatlined for a while and it's beginning to trend up. Similarly for the whole population, take the data back, it was coming down quite steeply. But flatlined for a period and is now beginning to trend up. The hatched line is what we thought, we don't know, what we thought were some of the indicator level thresholds for changing tiers. Obviously that's immaterial at the moment because the whole country is in lockdown. So, but for both the over 60s and the whole population, the trend is sadly upwards. Positivity, the proportion of people who test, the proportion of people who have symptoms, get a test and test positive is also trending upwards. A month ago, it was about 6.5%. Now it's closer to 10%, just shy of 10%. And again, that's not good news. Sadly, I wish I could tell you good news, but at the moment I can't. Incidence in the age bands is hot topic in my both social media timeline and inbox. The data that we have in Yorkshire, it varies from place to place, region to region, but the data that we have in Yorkshire, this is actually Sheffield's data, and Yorkshire and Sheffield are fairly similar, is that the incidence, 7-day incidence is lowest in the youngest population, so the age 0 to 4, 5 to 11, to a lesser extent, the 12 to 17, relatively flat. The growth is being driven by the working age population, particularly 35 to 44, 45 to 54. That will spread upwards into the over 60s. In epidemiology terms, it's known as stacking, and basically I will give it to my more elderly relatives, and that the trend will be for the incidence to rise into the older age groups, which obviously are a worry for all sorts of reasons. That's seen before, and that probably will be seen again. But at the moment, most of the growth is driven by the working age population, not the young, not the elderly, fortunately. Looking at cases, local super area across Sheffield, the transmission is largely across the city, slightly more common in the east of the city. I've reported on that before, and that will be a trend I'll continue to report on. Principally household transmission, and both the epidemiology and the real world evidence is crystal clear on that one. The thing that really matters here is between household mixing. So there's the importance of networks and social mixing. Within a household isn't a concern for me, other than obviously those people who become very, very poorly. That's a concern for all of us. But epidemiologically, it's the between households where you can spread the virus through spread the virus through new networks and through new social contact through mixing. And that is the trend. Most of the actual transmission happens within households for all sorts of reasons. Not all of it, but most of it. This is the deaths data. Two lines on the graph is the number of deaths per day since March. 2 lines on the graph. The dark line is hospital deaths. The orangey line is community deaths. We are reaching quite a high level of deaths per day. It has been declining, and it was declining through September. As the rates start to go up again, the 7-day incidence rates, many of those people will become very severely poorly, and some of them will sadly die. the deaths will start to go up again. So it remains a dangerous respiratory virus. It's a very easy to spread respiratory virus, and it still kills people. It's not something that's gone away, and it's not a figment of anybody's imagination. And so it's important to underscore that on a number of occasions. So epidemiology summary. R0 is somewhere between 0.9 and 1.1. I think it's probably above 1. In early December, it was 0.9. If it's 1.1, if 100 people have the virus, if R0 is 1.1, they will give that to 110 people, and that will continue to grow with that degree for the duration. The aim is always to keep R0 below 1. Early in June, R0 was 0.6. The case rate is certainly greater than 200 cases per 100,000 in a 7-day period, and rising, probably closer to 230, 240. Mid-December, it was less than 125 cases per 100,000 in a 7-day period, and falling. Positivity nearly 10%. A month ago, it was 6.5%. A significant proportion of hospital beds at Sheffield teaching hospitals have someone with COVID in them. The hospital is not overwhelmed. It's really, really important to be clear about that. Hospitals in Yorkshire are just in a different position to hospitals in London, but it's a very high proportion of people with COVID in a hospital bed in Sheffield, and it's difficult to manage. It's a difficult time of year. Hospitals are busy. There's some slight good news. I'll give you some good news when I know about it. We've done exceptionally well on the flu vaccination campaign this year, and flu hospitalisation is almost zero, which is unheard of, actually. So there is some good news, but not much, sorry. The impact of the new variant remains to be seen, but I don't think I will be reporting good news on that one, because 25% of cases in this town, in the order of, we can't be precise, are of the new variant. It's significantly more transmissible. That gives us very, 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 I will say, zero room for manoeuvre. Whilst we aren't London or the southeast of England, the numbers are still far, far too high for comfort, and actually now going in the wrong direction. Just before Christmas, they were going in the right direction, if plateauing and flatlining a little bit. Now they're not. Strategy, the outbreak control plan is largely intact. You've seen that slide before. I won't dwell on that, but we have an outbreak control plan. It's ultimately accountable to the Outbreak Strategy Board, which the Exec Director of Resources is responsible for, and the sponsor for. It's responsible for the outbreak control plan. The bullet points on the slide are the broad chunks of that, and there are named individuals responsible for each of the themes. There's a fairly well-developed infrastructure to deliver that. We keep adding to that, and the vaccine is the thing that we are adding to it, and obviously that's one of our routes out. And I'll come back onto that in just a second. So the basics are the basics. If I could tell you there are miracle answers, we would have thought of them, but I don't think there are any shortcuts. The basics will remain the basics for some time to come. There is scope for relooking at some elements of the strategy as we come out of lockdown on the other side. Forward look, this is the crystal ball gazing. Lockdown was probably inevitable given the epidemiology in southeast England, but it will only impact if we all 600,000 of us, behave as if we are in lockdown. Government can do what they want and will do what they want, but it absolutely depends on our behaviour. So it's really, really important to be clear on that one. I remember in March we were scared. Now we're significantly more used to the virus. We've lived with it for nearly a year now. I don't know whether we're scared, but it's still dangerous. It still kills people. The impact of lockdown will have the desired impact on infection rates. I've no doubt about that, but it comes at the cost of social and economic harm, and we need to be very mindful of that one. As I said, the epidemiology in Sheffield will leave us in an interesting space. I think our case rates will be very low, comparative to the rest of the country, certainly. We'll be getting into spring, and we'll start to be outdoors a lot more, so that will also have an impact on transmission. So it'll be an interesting space to be in come the end of lockdown. I don't know when that will be. The variants I've talked enough about, that will and is having an impact on our noughts. The good news is the mitigation measures are the same. that takes me on to the third point. The core fundamentals are pretty much the core fundamentals: testive symptoms, contact tracing, isolation. There are always improvements we can make in each of those three. At the individual level, social networks, social contact and networks, washing hands, face covering, distance, those things work. Testaments the level of flu infection there is at this time of year and the level of gastrointestinal infection, things that really made a difference by washing our hands a lot, really not there. So those things do work and have worked, and certainly have worked for COVID too. Support for individuals and businesses as we get into lockdown remains high on everyone's list. Vaccination is developing fast, is being implemented now. Many thousands of people have received the first dose of the vaccine. And I figure there'll be a lot of questions about that, so I won't dwell on that now. The last point is when will it end? I don't know. If I had to guess, late spring, but that is a guess. So if anyone wants to quote me, it'd be saying it's a guess. There'll need to be a very low community transmission as measured by the 7-day rate, and there'll need to be a very high level of vaccine coverage. My guess is probably more than 70 or 80% of the eligible cohort will need to be vaccinated. And even then, we will still need to be careful, I think. So, Lord Mayor, I shall stop there. And I've seen lots of people wanting to ask questions. You're on mute, Lord Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Greg. As I said earlier, Greg has to be away for 4:30, so we've got roughly an hour, and at the moment I've got about 20 questioners. So if you could all be as brief as possible when you ask your question, and everybody will get a chance to ask the question. Can I call upon Councillor Mohammed Maroof, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My questions are all on one theme. There are a number of questions, but they're all the same theme as we run through it. The question number one is, why did the council put out a letter to schools over the weekend telling schools to open when many of the local authorities were advising schools in their areas not to open? Number two, what data led to this decision, and can that data be shared with members? And does Greg still feel that the decision that they took over the weekend was the right decision, bearing in mind what the Prime Minister has said this afternoon, which is evidence shows schools act as a vector for spreading virus? And my final question, again on the same theme, is do you think teachers and kitchen and other school staff should be vaccinated as a matter of priority so that schools can reopen? And if you think that shouldn't be happening, then why not? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Greg?
Thanks, Councillor Maroof. So there isn't a pithy short answer to this one. I'm going to try and summarise about 25 pages of reasoned argument in a minute and a half. And even then I probably won't do it justice. There's a lot of stuff in here. The notion that schools aren't safe takes us into a complex world of transmission, risk mitigation, how schools handle cases, what is and isn't seen as a risk in a school environment. The reality is there's very little in school transmission that's to do with the nature of the running of the school. And the second reality is our schools have done an amazing job managing that risk. No two ways about that. No environment is safe. Any environment that brings individuals together will carry the risk of transmission of the virus. No environment can be 100% safe. And the notion that COVID secure equals absolute safety is not true. The happy byproduct of children being in schools is they get education. So that's the other side of the equation that obviously we mustn't forget. So schools have done and continue to do an amazing job to reduce the risk of transmission, not to zero, it can't be reduced to zero, but to pick up and manage cases and manage bubbles and clusters and send pupils and children, pupils and staff home as is needed. Second thing that was factually untrue in a lot of the narrative over the weekend was the case rate is very highest in the school age. The converse is actually true, it's lowest in the school age. And there's lots of local data to support that. To cut to the chase, the decision on schools was never our call. It's a Department of Education government call. and our position was that was always their call. We in Sheffield were very mindful of clusters, cases, the importance of bubble management. Our schools have done a fabulous job there, supported by my team and Public Health England, but the schools have done most of the hard work, to be fair. On comprehensive risk management, working to the COVID secure standard, note my caveat, COVID secure does not imply absolute safety, never has, never will in any context. From an epidemiological perspective, only an epidemiological perspective, there was a valid case that schools being open puts an upward pressure on our north. No two ways about that. But taking into account all of the things that are the downsides of schools being closed, missed education, loss of life chances, life opportunities, my recommendation to the council was we should support schools to open, despite the important caveat. It was never, ever, ever our decision. The full briefing, it does include the point on SAGE have called for schools to close. They have not, ever. SAGE made a very clear point about if schools are open, it's pretty difficult to keep R0 below 1. Yes, that's true, but they've never ever called for schools to close. On Sunday, I advised members of the cabinet that I think we should support schools to be open. I hadn't anticipated there would be a change in government policy on Monday when the Prime Minister put the country into lockdown. I was wrong there. I didn't think that was coming. I advised the cabinet that we should support schools to open. The schools need to make their own decisions in light of government policy. Schools are open. They're still open for children of key workers and vulnerable children, and quite rightly they should be. All of the safety arguments still stand, actually, and schools are still safe, or as safe as they possibly can be. Given a free hand, and it's not my hand, it's a government's hand, I would have probably put the country into lockdown, but schools would have been and remain my red line, because the lost opportunity, we've messed up children's education for quite a long period now, and that will have lifelong consequences. So it was a very difficult, very complex, very fast moving call. I will stand by the advice I gave to cabinet members on Sunday afternoon, mid-afternoon, before we put that letter out. On the last point, Councillor Maroof, on the question of vaccination of teachers as a priority group, that's not government policy. Government policy is based largely on age, with one occupational category, which is health and social care, and within that care home workers. I would not support, well, no, I would support the vaccination of teachers as a priority group to get the education system running and to make it even safer, but with the caveat that if we trade that off against not vaccinating people who are in the higher risk of death category, if we do that, we need to do that very clearly, very openly and very explicitly, and that is a national policy call. That's not our policy call, because we will be vaccinating people according to the Joint Committee on Vaccination Immunisations priority list. I did a very comprehensive answer, I think, for Councillor Gail Smith on Monday of this week, and I'm sure I can make that. I'm sure we can publish that with the record of the minute on the whole rationale for how the vaccine prioritisation order list. So sorry, that was an effort to summarise about 15 pages of advice into a couple of minutes. Now, I hope I did it justice.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Peter Garbett, Councillor Peter Garbett, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There's a lot of evidence and research around suggesting that COVID-19 outcomes are worse in areas with historically poor air quality. Do we know if there's any evidence of this in Sheffield? When I'm talking about COVID outcomes, I'm talking about, yes, greater incidence of people catching COVID, but also deaths and long COVID, etc. So is there any evidence at all of this in Sheffield, or have you looked into it at all?
Thanks, Councillor Garbett. No, I haven't looked into it. I don't. I'll answer your questions in reverse order. I don't think there is evidence about impact with regard to long COVID being greater in areas with poorer air quality. I don't think, I'm fairly certain that's the case. But with regard to hospitalisation and death, there is certainly national evidence that in areas of poorer air quality, there is a higher instance of national hospitalisation than admission to intensive care and then sadly death. However, in poorer areas of poorer air quality, they tend to, but not always, but they tend to be more deprived parts of our towns and places as well. So it might be all sorts of other factors that are actually driving it. But there's plenty of hypothetical and theoretical evidence to say that poorer air quality probably wouldn't be a causal factor in poorer outcomes, but certainly is not going to help. Good air is good for you. Who knew? I guess is perhaps the underlying point, and we continue to need to do all we can to improve the air quality. I've not done the local research, however, Councillor Garbutt.
Thank you, Councillor Jane Dunn.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you for your report. I emailed you on Monday. I've got about the change into the vaccination only being 1 dose and not 2 doses, and you gave me quite a detailed response. I've had some follow-ups from then. I mean, obviously, the change was quite late on that people were only going to get the 1 dose. And yet some doctors' surgeries are still giving the 2 doses out. I've been contacted by a number of people that don't understand why their vaccination has been cancelled. I mean, probably it was because it was too short notice to do otherwise, but obviously it's advice of the Chief Medical Officer. And in line with the epidemiology you've just shown us, we need to get as many people vaccinated as possible. I gave them the facts and figures that you gave me on the stats on the 1 dose, but on the internet it says differently. And I know this is what was quoted last night as well. So it'd be really good for you if you could actually explain, you know, about why 1 dose is absolutely fine. I mean, I'm really confident that the 1 dose is the way to move forward so that we can release lockdown, our kids can get back to school, and people that haven't left their homes for nearly a year can start to have a little bit of independence and, you know, the effect on mental health. Thank you. And also, what, you know, are we regulate, you know, how close are you working with the doctors to make sure that we are making sure that everyone's getting access to the 2 doses that should do when they come out, and that it's going to be fair and equitable across the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Councillor Dunn. So 2 doses are recommended. We will still be doing 2 doses of either the Pfizer vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine. The change in policy came between Christmas and New Year, and as I say, it was based on the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation's recommendation to the Chief Medical Officers, which they accepted, and thus Chief Medical Officers recommended to government, and it became policy. The what changed was the space between the 2 doses. So the initial studies were based on dose 1, period of, I think it was 10 to 12 days, dose 2. The bit that changed is the space. So the recommendation is now dose 1, then a 12-week period between dose 1 and dose 2, but everyone should still get 2 doses, but albeit with a longer space in between. The rationale for the change was that if the aim of the vaccination program is to reduce death by as much as possible, and no doubt the vaccine program will reduce death, and quite rightly too, and hospitalization, but then it makes more sense, and you can do more good by giving people enough covering immunity from dose 1, and you can give more people covering immunity by vaccinating lots of people once by half as many people twice. Over the same time period. And the rate limiting step is both the availability of vaccine and the availability of clinicians to stick needles into people's arms. So that was the basis of the science. It's fair to say that the original studies were done on the basis of the dosing, the 2 doses being relatively close together. the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, and I'll try and find and circulate the answer to this, but his assessment of what the JCVI had told him with regard to science is, so this was with regard to the Pfizer vaccine. If you take out of the cohort those who've had those people who've been vaccinated with dose 1 and received dose 1, if you take out of that those who developed an infection within days 1 to 9 of dose 1, i.e. those that were already in the incubation period and therefore were probably infected before the first needle, really good, 80 odd percent. Therefore, dose 1 is the reorient the policy. Dose 1 becomes the primary vaccination. Dose 2, 12 weeks later, becomes essentially a booster. That's the basis of the science. Comes to a point where you either have to believe the Joint Committee on Vaccination or Immunisation, or you don't. I believe them. They've been guiding vaccination policy for about the past 30 years exceptionally well, and I haven't got the time or the expertise to do the science myself. So I'm trusting in the scientific institutions in that one. It's a controversial decision, no two ways about that. But I put my faith in the Joint Committee on Vaccination. There's a very difficult bit of the cohort of people, and there are thousands of them, who have received dose 1 of the Pfizer vaccine, are expecting to receive dose 2. The national policy, it's an NHS England policy, is that those appointments should be cancelled, and to enable more people who haven't had dose 1 to get dose 1. That's very difficult for the local GPs because they've consented people to receive 2 doses. So our GPs are managing that as best they can and will be making clinical judgments about how best to manage that on a patient-by-patient basis. So the objective still remains to get as high a coverage of vaccine as fast as possible. And the AstraZeneca vaccine, by the way, will help that massively. But our problem about the cohort of people who've received dose 1 of the Pfizer vaccine and are expecting to and have consented to and have an appointment to receive dose 2 is not yet finished business. And it's quite controversial and it's been quite difficult to manage, actually. So I'm bearing with I think we should bear with our GPs on that one. I'm not yet personally involved in the delivery of the vaccination program, nor should I be. It's an NHS delivered program, and my job is policy and science, and most of the policy and science is done nationally. But we are establishing a citywide vaccination program delivery board, which will bring together the council, which our role is principally logistics and operational support, with the clinical input of the NHS to actually do the vaccination to achieve our shared aim of getting as many needles stuck in arms as quickly as possible. That will be operational from this week. All that said, many thousands of vaccines have been given, and it's been an amazing effort by the NHS, the biggest logistic effort they'll probably ever have to undertake, and credit to them for it. So it's proving quite difficult to manage because there are lots of moving parts and the policy keeps changing, but credit to our NHS, they're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Steve Harris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, yeah, vaccination rollout obviously has to be a top priority, but not to the exclusion of the other necessary inventions. And I wonder, listening to the news over the weekend, how are we going to balance the efforts we need to put into the vaccination programme with, for example, test, trace and isolate? So I have 3 questions. The first one is, just how much control do you anticipate Sheffield will continue to have over how the next level in tackling the virus is implemented? When we went into the first national lockdown in March, I asked if you thought the central-local balance was the right balance. Second question I have is, following on from that, I want to return to the somewhat thorny issue of asymptomatic infection and lateral flow tests as a tool in the toolbox. What is the current situation, and will there be any mass testing? And thirdly, the link on the council website to the NHS volunteer responders appears to be broken. How many requests, I don't know whether you have this or whether you have access to this, how many requests have there been from local people to register with the NHS Volunteer Responders Scheme, and how many requests have been taken up? And if you are able to, you know, have that data, are you able to provide a breakdown of the numbers for each role? For example, a steward volunteer for vaccination, for testing, and so on. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. There's a lot of people asking fiddly questions. I'll do again in reverse order. The answer to the question of volunteers is I don't know. It's known information, but I don't know that. So I will endeavour to find that out and make sure that that's published. Asymptomatic infections and mass testing. Thanks. My pets love hate. There are about 7 different variants or asymptomatic testing schemes using lateral flow devices that I can think of. The blunt reality is we do not have the capacity to, 1, implement most of those schemes half as well as we might, and 2, coordinate them together into a coherent whole. There's some lateral flow testing going on to enable care home visiting, for instance. The care homes themselves have said it's administratively impossible. They don't have the resources to do it, and it's proving very difficult. There are a number of other schemes in various stages of development. To cut to the chase, I don't anticipate implementing mass testing in a way that was operationalized in Liverpool anytime soon. I've not yet seen the evidence that it makes the difference that that anyone is claiming it makes. I've seen lots of evidence that it's operationally possible to do it, but it isn't the thing that's making the difference. The thing that makes most difference in the space of testing by miles and miles and miles is those who have symptoms getting a rapid test and then contact tracing and isolation. Asymptomatic testing might add a bit to that, but it adds a bit to it at huge resource cost. There are 2,000 troops on the street in Liverpool implementing this, which I think will then eventually transferred to civilian contractors. I don't have similar size city. I don't have 2,000 staff stored up in a cupboard somewhere. There's a theoretical possibility that government may pay for those staff, but haven't yet done so in any place that I'm aware of. The other point on asymptomatic testing is it's an imperfect test, false negatives being the key concern. In the order of 40% of test results will be false negative, i.e. I'm given a negative test, or I have a negative test, but I actually have the illness. If I had a negative test and I think I can then go and hug my friends, that becomes really problematic. And thirdly, of 100 people, 2 of them in the current epidemiology will have COVID-19. Prevalence is about 2%, there or thereabouts. Of the 2, 70% of them have symptoms, and 30% of 2 people, however you do the sums on that one, are asymptomatic. And of the 30%, that's a funny mix of truly asymptomatic, or actually just have symptoms and don't notice they've got symptoms, or are pre-symptomatic. So the science on asymptomatic testing and lateral flow devices does stack up in very niche areas and very defined target cohorts. And given a free hand, that we will go there using lateral flow testing on contacts of cases to 1, pick up most transmission where there's highest risk, and 2, to minimize isolation periods, which is absolutely appropriate to do. Definitely some benefit there. But mass testing in the context of whole populations, the science just doesn't bear it out, and that's before we get onto the resource commitment. Sorry, it's a very long and fiddly answer, and again, it summarizes hundreds of pages worth of stuff that I've written over the past month. but the science doesn't support it, and I've recommended against it. And there was a paper to the December cabinet that covered some of that. The last question on control, national versus local, it's still a national response. You know, it is the national pandemic, so it's entirely appropriate that there's a national government response. The pendulum has swung quite a lot with regard to local control, but there are still lots of things that I'm not in. I or the council aren't as in control of as I would wish. Contact tracing being one of them. We have stood up contact tracing locally within some of the COVID grant that was made available from government. It is doing exactly what we want it to, and very well actually. So the completion rates, the proportion of cases or contacts that are found, contacted, given advice is in the order of 80%. The national test and trace is in the order of 50%. So, you know, it's doing what we want. Arguably, I want to do that a lot quicker, but to do that, I need the resource, which is currently bound up in the national NHS test and trace. So the pendulum has swung, but there's still a long way to go on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Jack Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and good Happy New Year, everybody, and happy Brexit. I'd like and thank you, Mr. Fell, for your presentation. I've got two questions for you, Greg. The first one is yesterday at 5 o'clock, from watching the Prime Minister's broadcast, Professor Chris Whitty said there may be further restrictions next winter. He definitely said that. And have you any idea what he means by that? And secondly, will the COVID vaccine become a yearly vaccine like the flu vaccine? Finally, I'd just like to ask, I'm interested in why he said the winter time, because the government have been hammering away that COVID-19 is not affected by the summer and not affected by the winter. So why do you think he mentioned, if you have any idea, Greg, why would he mention winter? Is this just a flu? Because people who are dying from flu usually die from pneumonia, which is respiratory. And a lot of this COVID, is it just a bad flu? Can you give us the answer to that, please? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So again, in reverse order, it's definitely not a bad flu. So case fatality rate, the proportion of people who have flu who then die, is in the order of 0.1%. I may be wrong on that. I think it's about 0.1%. COVID mortality is in the order of 1%, which is actually obviously a big deal, particularly for the 1% for obvious reasons. But in the context of how easily it spreads, it's a really big deal. So it's not flu. If you have a severe illness from COVID, it's just significantly worse than a severe illness from flu. You're more likely to die, and that's before we get into the business of the cluster of symptoms. Sorry, the cluster of syndromes that are currently known as long COVID, which often have no bearing to the severity of the infection first time around. So it's definitely not flu. It's much more severe and it's much more serious than flu. Winter versus not winter. Most coronaviruses are seasonal. Common cold is a coronavirus and it's seasonal, and this is a coronavirus, it's seasonal. There may be virological reasons for that, which I don't know. I'll do some digging on that one. But principally, we spend more time indoors. The risk of transmission is highest indoors, particularly in places that we don't tend to clean down touch points regularly, like our homes, for instance, so mine. So the risk of infection is highest indoors. We tend to be closer to each other indoors. We tend to not be quite as COVID secure indoors, and we tend to spend more time indoors in winter. Less ventilated, there's less circulating air to take the viruses away. So I think COVID certainly, and most coronaviruses, are seasonal, and don't think the chief medical officer, I don't think the government's ever made the case, but they may have, I don't know. But coronaviruses are seasonal, this one is seasonal. On the next winter, I don't know, it's a crystal ball gaze that's probably a bit too far away from me. If I had to crystal ball gaze, I would say we'd have a fairly well vaccinated population by next winter. I sincerely hope so. but there will still be COVID-19 around. I don't think we will have eradicated COVID-19 by next winter. I think the time for that has been and gone, actually. If we want to eradicate it, it will be a huge effort, and we'll need to do things like close borders and the like. That comes with consequences. So I think we will have a well-vaccinated population that will have a reasonable degree of herd immunity, but it will still be around. So therefore, I think there will still be some form of probably public messaging on hand washing and distance and face coverings and the like, which lots of Southeast Asia do routinely. I don't know whether there'll be restrictions. That certainly would be a crystal ball I wouldn't be prepared to gaze into. The last point on the yearly vaccine, don't know. Currently, I think the thinking is it's a 2-dose, one-off vaccine, not an annual thing. But genuinely, we don't know. The science doesn't enable us to know how long immunity lasts. We just don't know that. We've got some immunological data from China that's about a year old now, and we think there is some residual immunity at a year, but we don't know about vaccine-induced immunity because the studies haven't gone on for long enough. And as we have seen to our cost, coronaviruses may mutate, and currently the vaccine is effective against the mutated strain, but that may not last. It's impossible to tell. So there's some crystal ball gazing in that one as well, Councillor Clarkson, but currently we think it's a one-off.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, and roll on 2022.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Drabble.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, I can appreciate that the vaccination is a national programme, but what can we do as a local authority to ensure that the people of Sheffield are vaccinated as quickly as possible?
Comms, myth busting, using role as community leaders. We'll be doing plenty of that as we get going, particularly as we get the AstraZeneca vaccine up and running. It is now being used and it's much easier to handle, so we can accelerate that programme a lot. I don't think there's a great deal that the council can do with regard to the clinical bit of this, the sticking needles in arms, and it always has been and always will be the NHS's role. We will have a role in comms, myth busting, building confidence, addressing people's legitimate concerns about safety. And there's a lot of myths out there as well. We certainly are and will have a role with regard to logistics as well. Doing all, standing offer to the NHS, we will do all we can with regard to the logistic support to enabling the NHS to deliver this as quickly as possible. Currently, that might involve using marquees outside primary care centres to enable people to kind of queue out of Not in the Rain, for instance, is one of the things at the moment. That will be a transient thing and will be developed and will be dependent on the situation of the day. But we have a standing offer to the NHS to do all we can with regard to logistics, because it is the single most important priority at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Davison, please.
Right, thank you very much, Greg, for your presentation. And it's answered some very interesting questions. The one I have, Greg, is about the people that are currently in hospital. And I've got from good sources that there are 300 at the moment in both Sheffield hospitals. What percentage, you say 1% of those are expected to die, or is that 1% as a whole, those including those outside? And now, of those 300 that are in the hospital, are the great majority over 60? And what happens in terms of the vaccination priority when they seemingly have recovered? Thank you.
So it is in the order of 300. I don't know the exact number, to be honest. They're mostly over 60. There'll be some that are younger than 60, but it's very age dependent, and the older the age, the more likely it is that someone is hospitalized. The 1% is the proportion of all people who develop symptoms will die, rather than all people who are in hospital will die. It's sadly higher in hospital. I don't know the number offhand. I don't know the percentage offhand, actually. It's worth me saying that the risk of death has come down massively, and it's come down massively because of two things. One, the NHS and particularly the intensive care clinical practice has changed so that I don't, but so that intensive care clinicians, prone people, turn them onto the fronts, and that helps the breathing. And that definitely had an impact on hospital mortality. And the second one is the use of a drug, dexamethasone, which has been used for decades for altitude sickness, and it is good for pulmonary edema, for instance. It just so happens it works particularly well here because pulmonary edema is one of the concerns, and that's massively reduced mortality. So hospital mortality has come down. There are many people now in hospital who wouldn't have survived in the first wave because the NHS has learned as they've gone along, and they've been done so spectacularly well. The downside of that is that they're surviving, but with complex illness for longer. So they are in hospital for longer. The length of stay is longer, but they are surviving. I am fairly certain that even if you've had COVID, the recommendation is that you should still be vaccinated. I'll double check that, but I'm fairly certain that the recommendation is vaccination for all. That will be addressed at the point of the individual consenting for the vaccine. So don't take my word now as the policy. I think I'm right, but I'll double check that. But before anyone consents for the vaccine, those are the kinds of things that get asked at the consent process.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Argencio.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, for the presentation and for all the answers you've given so far. I was just wondering whether you could tell us about what plans and agreements are in place with the two universities in Sheffield in terms of students coming back to Sheffield or going away from Sheffield and going back to their universities. I have a first-year uni student at home with me at the moment, and some of our friends from the south of the country rushed back to the university where she goes, that it's in Yorkshire, on Tuesday, yesterday, before the lockdown came into place. And I've heard this time and time again from different sources that there was like a rush to go back to uni, to the halls in particular, from lots, on the part of lots of students from the south of the country where the new variant is more widespread than here. So I know that some of the universities are telling most of the students to stay put, but for example, my daughter has not received any kind of official information from her university, and so what are we doing in terms of, as an authority to support the universities, and what is the advice that they are going to give their students?
So in terms of the supporting the two universities, we provide regular input and advice to the two universities on one, interpreting the national policy, and two, being COVID secure campuses and being COVID secure teaching and learning environments and accommodation, and managing cases and clusters as they occur. And that's been the case from the start of the pandemic. The universities are both independent institutions, and they're responsible to the Department of Education. Well, they're ultimately independent bodies, but their policy responsibility is to the Department of Education, not to the body known as Sheffield City Council. The further ed minister, Michelle Donnellan, I think she is, wrote to the two universities well before the lockdown and advised them that they should not start routine face-to-face teaching other than in the types of courses where it's very difficult to do without some face-to-face and or classroom time. So most obviously nurse doctor training, allied health professional training, teacher training, I think, is on that list as well. So there is some face-to-face teaching going on, and students will have come back to Sheffield for that. But I think I must check, but I think both universities are offering online as the default for most, but not all, because there are some caveats to that. It's fair to say, even in circumstances where students have travelled back, so a medical or a nursing student has travelled back from somewhere in the southeast, the vast majority of people do not have this illness. Some of them will have this illness, but the vast majority won't. So just on numbers, most of those that travel back will be infection free. And obviously it's critically important that when people do travel back and they develop symptoms, we manage them in the way that we would always manage that. So the individuals need to get rapidly tested and isolate. And my sense is but both universities have managed that pretty well. I know both universities have managed that pretty well. The final thing I'd say is there was a big spike in cases in Sheffield at the start of the September university term. The data bears that out. We welcome tens of thousands of students back to Sheffield as a university city. It goes with the territory. It happened in all university cities. That spike was principally in 18 to 24-year-olds, aka the tens of thousands of students we welcome back. That spike did not bleed into the general population in the way that we all feared it would, actually. If you take the 18 to 24-year-olds out of the data in Sheffield, our epidemic curve looks just the same as every other place in South Yorkshire, certainly. And I know Newcastle DPH has done the same piece of work, and he reported the same. So our fear that it would bleed into the general population didn't actually come to pass. So all up, I'm not. I do have worries about it, but I'm not as worried about it as I was last time round. And the reality is, some face-to-face teaching actually is necessary, and students will have come back for that. And both universities have pretty good systems to manage it.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Price.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Few points really. I was tested positive last October and had a couple of weeks when I was poorly, and half my family went down as well. I had my second jab this morning of the vaccine. Now, how immune am I now, and am my family? Can we mix? I've had two vaccinations, and I've already gone through the disease itself. Am I free now to mix?
Sadly, no. You're breaking the law if you do, and I can't do anything about the law of the land. Sorry. You're probably, if you've had second jab this morning, you're probably mostly immune. My personal recommendation will be to wait for 10 or 15 days whilst the full immunity, the antibody response develops. But even then, you can carry the virus on your hands, and we don't actually know whether or not being vaccinated reduces transmission. We know that it reduces the risk of death, and if you've had the virus anyway, you're fairly certain you're probably immune. We know the vaccine reduces the risk of death and serious illness, but we don't know whether it reduces the risk of transmission. So it might be that people could have much milder illnesses but still be shedding virus, or aka infectious to others. But Councillor Price, the sad reality is if you do mix, you're breaking the law. Sorry to have to tell you that. So no is the short answer.
There was lots of elderly people queuing up and getting jabbed this morning with me, and they all said, "Oh, we can now go out now we're fully immune."
I know it's a common one. We're trying to address that one.
Fine. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Andy Sanger.
Thank you. Happy New Year. I'm just going back to Councillor Argencio's questions. I mean, am I right in thinking that both universities are carrying out lateral flow tests with students who return? And can I also say that in terms of what the Vice Chancellor said in terms of their assurance about blended learning, that's gone out of the window with the Prime Minister's statement on Monday, and now it's going to be distance learning, online, except for practical classes and clinical practice for sort of health students. Is that really all that's left for students? And so what's the situation in terms of how the council is working with the universities? Because clearly the universities are hugely important for this city, and we were told by both vice chancellors in October that it was really important that the students had as normal as possible academic year. That seems to be impossible if you're now saying we've got a 3 or 4 month national lockdown.
So I'm not cited on the precise nature of what the two universities' teaching offer is. Both universities and students place a high value on face-to-face teaching, and both Vice-Chancellors are really clear in terms of the mental well-being of students. Face-to-face is really, really, really important. However, it's not an option for significant numbers of courses at the moment, but I'm not actually cited on the precise details because I'm not a member of the either of the institutions. My team's role with regards to the two universities is the big P, big H public health support rather than the teaching and learning offer. On lateral flow testing, yes. I don't have the recent results. It's worth noting that at the end of last term, the two universities tested in the order of 10,000 of their students. They found about 12 cases, and that takes me back to an earlier point. It's a huge resource outlay for not a great deal of benefit. So I don't know the recent results, but the finding across the whole of the university sector is similar in terms of the number of tests done to the number of people who test positive ratio. However, they are still doing it because the government have mandated them to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Francine Johnson.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation, Greg. I want to ask a question about early years. And firstly, I want to make it really, really clear that I don't want any education providers to be closed. Nobody does, but we all know that this will hit the most disadvantaged the hardest, but the social, economic and public health consequences of this ongoing pandemic will hit the most disadvantaged far harder. And I think all late and inadequate halfway lockdown measures exacerbate this and its impact on the most disadvantaged. So we know that this third wave is significantly worse than the first, with a virus that's more transmissible. Yet unlike in the first wave, where early years were closed to all but the children of key workers and vulnerable kids, they currently remain open. The early years sector is already facing a serious funding crisis, and it is possible that nurseries could fold in the country with these added pressures. Early years workers are currently very anxious, it seems, and are lacking guidance. A childminder in the city I've spoken to is so worried about the lack of guidance available for specifically childminders on the gov.uk website that she has had to temporarily close her business. Do we think it's safe for early years to remain open to the children of non-key worker parents and non-vulnerable children? And what are we doing to support the early years sector in the city? Thank you.
In reverse order, in terms of support of the same as we've done, same as we've done for school. I think it's schools. Sorry, it's probably fair to say that we've not been quite as all over that sector as we have been the school sector. I think I'm not doing anyone a disservice to say that we've not been done as much in that sector. I've not clocked that there was a concern amongst the early years professionals that there was a concern about lack of guidance. I can address that, and I will go away and address that now. And I might find that some of our staff have actually done a whole bunch of work around the guidance for early years sector in all sorts of shapes and guises, but that person just hasn't got it for whatever reason. So I'll check that now because I can do something about that. I can do something about that quickly. But yeah, we've developed the standard operating protocol for how we manage cases of COVID-19 in the early years sector, just in the same way as we've got the standard operating protocol for managing cases of COVID-19 in schools. It's broadly the same set of standard operating protocols. I'll check the level of coverage or depth and saturation of that guidance in the sector. I don't know that, to be honest, but it's there, and we've done it, and we've done kind of fairly regular weekly updates to the sector via Beth and apparently my team and Nicola Shearston. So I hope that provides reassurance. There's almost certainly more that we can do in that space, but it's not that there's nothing there already. On the should early years be open, no more or less safe than the school sector. The scenario is fairly similar, but again, it's a national policy decision. Now, the government have made their views very, very clear. It is an interesting one to me as to why early years remains open to all, but schools don't. I don't know that. I genuinely don't know the thinking behind that one.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Otton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Mr. Fell, I was tearing my hair out a little bit at your presentation. You told us there's a new, more transmissible version of the virus, which there is, and it's going to be the dominant version in Sheffield soon if it isn't already. But that the mitigations remain the same, and this doesn't make any sense. I mean, the COVID secure guidelines, we kind of thought they were inadequate before, didn't we? Because of ventilation and aerosols that weren't probably taken into account. But now we know mathematically we have a more transmissible variant. The COVID secure guidance for public transport for workplaces are therefore mathematically inadequate to the tune of 70% or whatever the number is. How can you just give us that with us? I realise it's not your policy. I don't mean to sound like I'm having a go at you, but how can you just give us that with a shrug? The guidelines are the same. The guidelines need to be toughened up. Why aren't they doing it? What is, where is the outrage that we're expected to go ride the same buses and go to the same workplaces that are now mathematically known to be COVID insecure? Thanks.
The mitigations in terms of the behaviours that individuals do or don't need to display to reduce the risk of transmission are exactly the same. Wash hands, wear face coverings, keep distance, limit social contacts. They remain the same. They always have remained the same. Our problem is probably with adherence to the guidelines rather than the problem that the guidelines aren't appropriate. I think the guidelines remain appropriate. I'll send you the link to the SPI-B paper that was published the other day. I'm not aware of anything fundamental that is different. I accept your point about toughening up. That's to do with implementation of measures and adherence to measures rather than what the actual measures are.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Chaplin, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Happy New Year to everyone. We must hope it's a better one. And thank you to Greg for the very detailed presentation. My question is around hospitals and the common areas in hospitals where people attend for accident and emergency and for casualty and those sorts of outpatient areas that are still in use. I'm raising that because our family believe that that's where two of our older relatives, or one of our older relatives, contracted COVID and brought it into the household. We'd been very careful all through the year to keep the older relatives safe, but sadly it wasn't to be. I just wondered what work had been done on that, given that it is known that a number of infections do arise in the hospital settings. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chaplin. So if I may, I'm going to get detailed written for the NHS because I'm not an employee of the NHS, and I couldn't actually comment in huge detail on what the very, very detailed work that has gone on. To risk minimise, it can never be made zero risk. And I accept what you've said, that's maybe where some transmission has happened. But it's probably better if I get a written answer from the NHS on that one rather than me try and make up what I think they're doing. That's okay.
Thank you for that, Greg. Yeah.
Thank you, Greg. It's fast approaching 4:30. I know you need to get off. How do you need to go now?
Well, I need to go at 4:30, so I'm happy to do some quick fire or to keep 4 minutes to go. So it's a monthly pleasure for me.
Okay, so Councillor Penny Baker.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be really fast. Greg Fell, Mr. Fell, sir. What is happening with patients who have an EpiPen? Some of them turned up for the Pfizer jab before Christmas to be turned away because they had allergies. The advice after Christmas is fluctuating. Where are they going? Who's going to talk to these patients and explain to them why they can or can't have the jab? 2, there's a lot of people out there who are again isolating because they've been asked to. People who are shielding, people who are remaining in their homes just as the government has instructed them to do so. Their welfare is a consideration. A lot of them now are struggling to pay for food or heat yet again. Has any consideration been made to give some sort of extra winter fuel allowance, not only to pensioners, but those on lower incomes? Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can't be much faster than that.
Quick question, quick answer. EpiPens, I don't know precisely. It's a question for NHS policy, and I'll find the NHS policy. It may keep changing. There was some well-trod, well-publicised incidences of severe allergic reactions to the Pfizer vaccine just before Christmas. It's fair to say that severe allergic reactions happen. They don't happen very frequently, but they do happen, and the trial data made that abundantly clear. But everyone was on high alert, so they were very well reported. They were both very well managed. I hadn't clocked that there was a change in policy with regard to not giving the Pfizer vaccine to somebody with an EpiPen. It may have changed and changed back again for all I know. It's a detailed clinical policy question, and I shall find the answer and get back to you on that one. Shielding, we've basically stood up. We never actually stood them down, but we formally stood up the arrangements that we had in place before with regard to community hubs and the standing up the helpline number. I don't know that we've had any discussions yet about additional winter fuel payments and the like to those who are shielding, because clearly this time it is in winter, not summer. So I'll check that one and get back to you.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you for all your questions. I can't take any more because unfortunately Greg has to go. We've had a good hour at it, questions. So can I suggest that we note the information reported and thank the Director for attending the meeting, providing his update and responding to questions. Is that agreed? I will take silence as
agreed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Greg. And happy
until
New Year.
Next time. Thank you.
Right, we've got item 9, review of the members' code of conduct and councillors' complaints procedure. This item of business is to approve an amended members' code of conduct and councillor complaints procedure, which was approved by the Audit and Standards Committee on the 30th of July 2020. Details relating to the amended code and procedures are set out in the report of the Director and Legal and Governance, which was published with the agenda for this meeting. The motion to adopt the proposed changes to the Code of Conduct and the procedure for dealing with complaints regarding city, parish and town councillors and co-opted members is to be moved by Councillor Siannog Mayor Richards and seconded by Councillor Simon Clement Jones, being the Chair and Deputy Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee. If any other member wishes to speak, may I remind them that they need to request to do so via the Zoom chat facility, sending their message to all panellists. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would just commend this amended version to all the members. I'd just like to say that the members of the Audit and Standards Committee, sorry, did do a deal of work on this. We did workshops, we did questionnaires, and we did discuss it. So it wasn't just a paper exercise. And I'd like to thank Councillor Argencio as well as Councillor Clement Jones for the work that they put into it. And with that, I move, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Clement Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to echo the thanks of Councillor Mayor Richards to, thanks to Councillor Mayor Richards first, but also to the officers, the independent members and our councillor colleagues for the work they put in. Seconded, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I've got one councillor, should I say, wishing to speak on this, and it's Councillor Alison Teal.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion, please. I'll just explain why. We'd like to delay the adoption of changes of the Members' Code of Conduct until we have completed a review of the Officer Code of Conduct. The reason we're asking for this is that members are told that we must comply with the protocol for member-officer relations and respect the impartiality, integrity of the authority statutory officers and its other employees. I raise this because of the findings of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman report regarding a complaint made by a member of the public about the council's behaviour in respect to the trees dispute. The Ombudsman said, "This case highlights the imperative for councils to act with honesty, openness and transparency. Without this, people can lose faith in their integrity and not trust that they are doing the right thing. Apologising to the people of Sheffield for its past actions and acknowledging what went wrong will help to rebuild trust further." I have also recommended the council shares with us how it will take the learning from this case and embed accountability and transparency in both its new tree strategy, and it should also consider if there are wider implications for how it delivers services and lessons it should learn. So given that many of the officers and members who were involved in this shameful period of our history are still in post, we think it's really important that we need to review the Officer Code of Conduct also, and it would be good to do those two things as a complementary piece of work. Thank you.
So do you want me to respond, Lord Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, just a moment, Sinead. Okay, well, we've just had this brief discussion here about this. Unfortunately, Councillor Teal, you missed the deadline for submitting this, and it can't be raised from the floor because all the information has not been. Is that right? It's been sent out.
The report was published with the agenda.
The report was published with the agenda, and amendments for this will not be taken from the floor at this point. That's the information from Legal and Governance that I've got.
Well, I don't know if one of our members would like to dispute that. We were under the impression that it was suitable to take this from the floor today. Yeah.
No amendments. I've just you know, amendments have to be submitted by 12 o'clock. It should have been submitted in writing by 12 o'clock.
Okay,
so that's the reason why we're not going to allow that amendment to go through.
Councillor Johnson's asking for a point of order, please.
I am asking for a point of order, yes. It's an amendment that couldn't be put before because, of course, formally this motion's only just been put. So the amendment is to the motion that's been put. It's not to the report. No one had previously moved this motion to adopt the Code of Conduct. And conversely, of course, the alternative way of looking at it, say that there is a report. There simply has been no motion put by anyone to adopt the report that's being put forward, in which case it could no doubt be dealt with next month.
Can I suggest that this is passed today because there's a lot of work that has gone into it. The piece of work which Alison is asking for is, I think, a separate piece of work which may or may not impinge on this current adopted proposed code, and that we on the audit committee will look at that in one of our future meetings once we know what is actually being asked for. You know, I'm not saying no, Alison, I'm saying let this go through, and I guarantee as the chair of the audit committee that what you are proposing, which I'm sure Angela will come forward with those, we will look at. Does that make sense to you, Councillor Clement Jones? Do you think that's an acceptable response?
I'm happy with this. I mean, I don't think it's strictly relevant, and I'm a bit, you know, this wasn't raised at audit committee, and you know, to bring this up now, you know, seems a little off. But yeah, so I'm more than happy to deal with that at the appropriate time. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, are you happy with that, Councillor Teal? What
No.
Councillor Mayor Richards has just said?
No, I think it's really important that we look at the officers' code of conduct at the same time, and I'm sorry that I was slow to give that consideration.
I don't think the officers' code of conduct actually comes under the audit committee per se for members to discuss or otherwise in that way, because it's a code that the officers themselves would discuss and put together. I'm happy to take the advice of the monitoring officer that if we can, but even so, I would suggest we can't do that now. I'd like this to go through so that we have got this amended, and I think much needed code, and we'll certainly take up and if necessarily add to it. It's a living document. We can keep adding to it, Alison. I just want it to go through now so that it's there for us. Adding to it again in the future won't be a problem.
I think the Director of Legal and Governance might have something to add to that. Just a moment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just with regard to the officers' code of conduct, that is something that's part of a contractual agreement with employees, and the trade unions will have a role in changes to any terms and conditions. It's not something that we can just do. As Councillor Mayor Richards has just pointed out, it's not something that's within the remit of the Audit and Standards Committee. So whilst I can see the point you're making, Councillor Teal, I'm not sure that the two are related that directly, and delaying one in pursuit of the other doesn't necessarily make sense.
So, Lord Mayor, are you taking any more speeches in favour of the amendment? There have been a number of speeches against it.
Lord Mayor, can I have a point of order here? Please, Lord Mayor, a point of order. We have a set of rules and constitution that we go by, and it says that we have to have amendments in by 12 o'clock. On the day of council. My understanding is that this has not been submitted. I think it's caught everybody by surprise that come in on the floor, and therefore for me it's got to be ruled out of order, Lord Mayor.
Well, I've just taken advice from Legal and Governance and Democratic Services, and this amendment should have been submitted in writing by midday, and it hasn't been. So
why wasn't the motion submitted then?
I'm going to rule the amendment out of order.
How about the motion then? Is it one rule for Labour and one for the Greens then? As usual.
I'm now going to move to the vote on the motion to adopt the changes to the Code of Procedure.
Disgraceful, Councillor Douglas.
Well, it goes both ways, doesn't it? I'm just saying that, you know, you can't have one rule for Labour and one for the Greens.
Is the motion agreed? I will take silence as information of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. I expect that will be. Yeah.
I'd like to dissent.
I want to dissent as well.
Abstaining, please.
Okay.
Could I ask a couple of
questions? And me, Lord Mayor, abstaining.
So I'm also abstaining.
Yeah, I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Disgraceful. That's all I can say. Even you're on that way.
It's an all-party recommendation. Is the Green Group on the council?
Enough is swearing. Gosh.
Can I just speak? Is the Green Group on the council wishing to Abstain. And have that recorded.
Yes, please. And also that we're
Yeah.
victims of the abuse of power. Thank you.
And I,
Could I? Oh, give it
Lord
all
Mayor,
there.
I think you need to
An all
withdraw that,
party.
councillor Teal.
Yeah, withdraw.
And do so now before it comes back to bite you.
No,
Okay, fine.
I've been victimized
Okay.
many times and I won't be
Okay,
retracted.
right. Well, okay, fine. Thanks, Alison.
Throw your dummy out. Usual nonsense. Nonsense.
Can we all respect? Can we all respect the Lord Mayor? The Lord Mayor did say.
Right. I'm going to move now to the next. I'm going to move now to the next business. Okay. That motion is carried. Okay. Right. Item 10. This item of business is to note an appointment that has been made to the post of interim executive director of place. Details relating to the appointment are set out in the report of the Director of Human Resources and Customer Services, which was published with the agenda for this meeting. The motion to note the information contained in the report informing the council of the recent appointment of Mick Crofts to the post of interim executive director of place is to be moved by Councillor Bob Johnson and seconded by Councillor Mary Lee. If any other member wishes to speak, may I remind them that they need to request to do so via the Zoom chat facility, sending their message to all panellists. Councillor Johnson.
Formally move, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Lee.
Formally move, Lord Mayor. Seconded.
Does any member wish to speak? Okay. I'm now going to move to the vote on that appointment. Is the motion agreed? I will take silence as affirmation of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. Okay. That motion is carried. Item 11, minutes of previous council meeting. It is proposed that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 2nd of December 2020 be approved as a true and accurate record. Is that motion formally moved?
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Is that motion formally seconded?
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor, then.
All agreed. I will take silence affirmation of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. That motion is carried. Okay. Item 12, representation, delegated authorities and related issues. Here we go. It is moved by Councillor Diane Hurst, seconded by Councillor Tony Dams, that approval be given to the changes in the membership of committees, etc. The appointment of representatives to serve on external bodies and related issues as detailed in the schedule circulated by email to all members earlier this day. Councillor Hurst.
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dams. Councillor Dams.
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry. Does any member wish to speak? I'm now going to move to the vote on the motion. Is the motion agreed? I would take silence as affirmation of the meeting. If any member wishes to dissent, please unmute and speak. That motion is carried. Okay, we're now going to take tributes to Councillor Peter Rippon, who sadly passed away, as I mentioned earlier, on the 20th of December. I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, on the yes. I'm starting to get a list of people together. So if you'll just bear with me. Who's the first one? Yeah. Just before we do that, Peter served as councillor for 17 years, He was elected to the council in May 2003, representing the Shire Green and Brightside ward, and later went on to represent the Richmond ward. Peter also served as the 118th Lord Mayor of Sheffield in the municipal year 2014-2015. His duties also included being co-chair of the Planning and Highways Committee for the last 5 years, as well as being Labour Group Whip. I know I miss Peter very much. He was a big inspiration to me when I came on the council, and I owe a lot to him for what he did for me since I came on the council. So I'm now going to open it up to Councillor Sinead Mayor Richards first, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When I was first elected to Shire Green and Brightside in 2012, I inherited 2 ward colleagues, the 2 Peters, Pete the Elder, who is still here, and Pete the Younger, who was clearly Pete Rippon. And the pair of us used to call Peter Price Dad. And that was in line, I think, with Peter Rippon's very mischievous sense of humour. Being with the pair of them was like being in my own episode of Last of the Summer Wine, as they bickered together, got on really well, and was so welcoming to a very junior councillor, or the apprentice, as they both called me. An example of their deep friendship was that when Pete the Elder had his 80th birthday, we all went away to the Lake District together, and on his actual birthday, Pete the Elder climbed haystacks to show that he could still do it, taking Pete the Younger with him, climbing through rain and then through snow to reach the top. And when they got down, Pete Rippon said, "I'd just like to say what a pleasure it was to do that climb with you, Pete, but I can't. It was bloody awful, and I'm never doing that with you again." And then we all carried on. Pete was a very dapper man, and every Christmas, I always had to buy him a pair of Paul Smith striped socks. And if you ever saw him in council meetings, those striped socks were always on display. I had the privilege of proposing Pete to be the Lord Mayor. And as I was standing in the canteen getting my drink to go into the council chamber, the lady behind the counter said to me, "Oh, who's the Lord Mayor this year?" And I said, "Oh, it's Pete Rippon." And she said, "Oh, Peter Rippon, he's a lovely man." And that's exactly what I'd like to say about Pete, a lovely man. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Councillor Shafak Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It was with great sadness that we heard just before Christmas, I think it was a couple of days before Christmas, and I heard the news via Penny Baker, and obviously Penny will pay tribute about the sad news that Pete was at home with the family and then got took ill and unfortunately left us all. And as Sinead said, he was a lovely man. He was great fun, great to wind up. And I remember, I think it was 2009, when there was a by-election in East Ecclesfield. I didn't know where Pete lived. So I got around from Vic Bowden and went and delivered, and on a particular road, I'm not going to mention it here, I delivered the leaflet or whatever it was, and out popped Pete Rippon. We had a laugh and joke on what's all this, and I said, "A fine bit of literature, you ought to be educated in this and all this." So we had a good laugh. And then from then onwards, whenever I could, when I went and helped in East Ecclesfield, I always used to try to get that round. And then I would go and deliberately bang on the door, knowing Pete might be in, to have 2-3 minutes to make sure he got our leaflet. And he took it with great spirit. There was no animosity, a laugh and a joke. And, you know, that's the mark of the man. And as Lord Mayor, we continued that relationship. Yes, there was a serious time, Lord Mayor, you know the score more than anyone, time and a place to chair meetings and be firm with us, put us all into order. But actually, there were times when Pete was fantastic. And then obviously he was a whip, so we had a lot of dealings with him. And these are real characters, Lord Mayor, that we've lost. We lost Pat early on in the kind of COVID crisis, and then to kind of end the year, you know, we had yet another tragedy in Pete. Clearly my thoughts are with Tim, who was one of my colleagues on the council, Councillor Tim Rippon, but also the rest of the family. And clearly we're not going to be able to go to the funeral, all of us. It's going to be limited. But I think those that go there, I think, please take the message that all 84 of us have Pete in our hearts, and we'll be wishing the family, you know, our best wishes at this very difficult time. But they've got a proud record in there in Peter Rippon and what he did on this council, and we will forever be grateful. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shafak. Councillor Andrew Sangar.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, clearly it's a huge loss to the council. I mean, Pete Rippon was just so much fun, but also just such a gentleman, a lovely guy, as Sean has said. I mean, I think most of my dealings. I mean, clearly I knew him when he was Lord Mayor, and he was a very good Lord Mayor for this city, and he was a Lord Mayor for the whole of the city. But I really want to focus in terms of planning, because that's probably where I knew him most. And you know, there's a certain camaraderie in terms of the site visits, and you know, even now I can't quite believe that Pete's not going to be there. And you know, it was the last time I saw him was a site visit in Stocksbridge when he was too ill to continue, and I know that was the start of the illness that has taken him. But he was very fair. I say he had a great sense of humour in private, but in terms of dealing with the public, he was very fair. He made sure that the public were able to present their cases at planning meetings, and he fought for what he thought was right, particularly in terms of affordable housing, and he really pushed developers and council officers on the issue of affordable housing. But I mean, Peter will be remembered by all of us for his service to the city and his great sense of humour. I'm going to miss him a lot. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Sangar. Councillor Colin Ross.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Comments that have been circulating across all members of the chamber since Peter's sad loss show just how well respected he was, and he'll be a very sad loss to the conduct of the council, and he certainly elevated the status of the chamber. I knew Peter from time on the Fire Authority together. We served on the Sheffield City Region Scrutiny Board together, and his time as Lord Mayor when he did visits to the ward. He and his wife went down the storm with the locals, you know, when he was doing the visits. He just had that human touch and got on with everybody. And as I say, both of them were a formidable team. And it was very sad. I attended the funeral in Ecclesfield Church of his wife, and it was a terrible sort of situation then. And I'm sorry that more of us can't attend Ecclesfield in the very near future. I regarded Peter as a friend, actually, a colleague on the council, a political opponent, yes, but never a political enemy. We may have had different points of view about different ways of getting to the same ends, but there was always that bond between us, and I, in some ways, wish there was more of that bond across the chamber with other people. And as Shafak said as well, with Pat going earlier this year, which had many of the same attributes as Peter, they'll both diminish the quality of the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Vic Bowden, please.
Thank you. Before Peter was a city councillor, he was a parish councillor for 4 years, representing Ecclesfield Village with me. He was a respected and constructive member and got on well with all 14 of us Lib Dems. He was always friendly whenever I saw him around Ecclesfield, and we exchanged humorous banter at election times. As Lord Mayor, he reopened Ecclesfield Library as a volunteer-run facility and made a delightful speech. For him, human interaction transcended party politics. I will miss him.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Baker, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When you think about Peter, the first word that comes to mind with me is a gentleman. He was an absolutely true gentleman, a remarkable man who considered everybody else before himself. He was a fantastic Lord Mayor. He with Susan did an awful lot for this city, despite the fact that she was so ill at the time. It was pretty remarkable how they got through that year. I, like Colin, went to his funeral, and he was so fussy that we bothered to go to the funeral. And I'm thinking, what are you thinking about us for? It's your wife's funeral. You remarkable gentleman, you. He always had a smile. He always had a greeting. He never ignored anybody. He always said that normal Sheffield greeting, hello, you all right? And he meant it. And he meant it really and truly. I know exactly what Shafak's talking about because Councillor Vicky Priestley, who I know is on here, and I played the knock and hide game by Peter's front door on many occasions, but it always ended up with a hug and a smile and a lovely conversation that, you know, just went above anything that's to do with politics. Because actually he was a true politician, because what he did was he cared, and he cared deeply. In fact, if he had a fault, it was the fact that he struggled to find something bad in people. He would look at people immediately and find some good there. And Lord Mayor, I could go on forever about that charming gentleman and the warmth he gave to people and this city. But, you know, there's a time to stop. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Susan. You gave us a lot. We'll never forget you. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Penny. Very nice. Councillor Mike Drabble.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I didn't know Peter as long as some colleagues on the council, but I was privileged to know him for the last 4 years as ward colleague in Richmond. And indeed, I think he was a perfect ward colleague. There are a number of things I'll miss about him as a ward colleague. One is the fact that he seemed to regard various community groups as a farm in which he'd go and win the bingo at every single one, collect prizes from each, and you know, kind of didn't seem to realise that, you know, Peter, these people might have to vote for you again one day. Do you really want to be winning every time? You know, so and also I missed public meetings when he had a, you know, great way with people, and he'd listen to them even if they were often quite angry. And also I'll miss his raised eyebrows when I had something idiotic at a public meeting and probably got people's backs up the wrong way. But I think most of all, I'll miss his fundamental decency. And it really was a privilege having as a ward colleague somebody who I knew I could rely on, and I knew was as thoroughly decent as perhaps a person can be. I'll miss you, Peter.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Councillor George Linders-Hammond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Such a sad time. And when I was first elected, I'll admit that initially I thought that councillors Peter and Tim Whipham were actually brothers, not father and son. And I think that says something about his youthful energy, and he brought that to town hall. And I think with his passing, for me, it brings so much into focus that we all miss actually the good humour, and that goes across party, and the good relations that do exist in town hall, because he really, really represented that for me. And I think he could flip between these really serious roles he held, whether that being, as people said, a brilliant Lord Mayor, as a committee chair, or as our group chief whipping quite choppy times, and then suddenly he'd be the cheeriest face among us. And he always joked about my relative youth and always looked out for me in so many different ways. He was, as everyone has said, it's the best representation of him, simply a lovely man. If you told me a year ago that we'd lose 2 people from the council like Pat and Pete, I just wouldn't believe you. And it's just still hard to imagine that one day we'll go back to being in town hall together, which is great, but we won't be with someone like Pete, who just, for my entire time on council, really epitomised the good things about friendliness and camaraderie amongst us as politicians, and I hope we can all learn something from him, really. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, George. Councillor Alan Hooper, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, Peter, I first came to know him in 2004, the year I was elected to the council a year after Peter. I'd heard of him from parish council days, but we didn't meet or serve together at the right same time. I learnt in early December how ill Peter was from Helen Jackson, ex-MP, and Helen informed me how serious Lily was. And we spoke together about Peter. But for me, Peter, and it's been said before, was just a lovely man. When you met Peter, he'd always got something to say to you. He always respected you, always. And I think from that, he gained respect from everyone. So it was a give and take, but a fantastic man and a great loss to the council. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Sue Auckland, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to echo a lot of what people have already said, had to say about Peter. I hadn't known him all that long in terms of some of the other members here, but over recent years, certainly working with him through the WIPS meetings, I did like him and admire him. And again, to repeat what other people have said, he was a lovely man, a gentleman, and always friendly and helpful. Peter is just such a great loss to the council and to the communities that he worked with. Peter represented the very best of public service and political service. I've always held him in the highest regard from the first meetings with him, where he's been there, until the very last. And we were so very surprised to hear what had happened. And my condolences go out to his family. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Diane Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I had the great good fortune to be a ward colleague of Peter's when Mike, Peter and I stood for election there in the All Out in 2016. And I just echo what everyone has said. Such a lovely, thoughtful, kind, caring man, such a gentleman. He worked so hard in the communities, and he was so supportive. I've had many messages of condolence passed to me and put on Facebook by the community groups, which I have passed on to his family. And I have to say, one of my abiding memories of him will not be his wacky socks or his continuing desire to follow fashion. Lots of community groups remarked on the trainers she wore. But it was him dressing up as a Christmas cracker at a gala in Woodthorpe to support the Tenants and Residents Association when they were putting on an event for the community, especially the young people in that community. And that's a lovely memory to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you very. Yeah. Councillor Martin Phipps, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's very sad to have lost Peter, especially after already having lost Pat earlier this year. It just feels quite cruel. I only knew Peter for a short time, going to the WIPS meetings with him. Peter was always friendly in those meetings and liked to joke before council, quite a good sense of humour. And yeah, he always did have those wacky socks on, didn't Yeah, I think we got on quite well during the meetings, and even if we didn't always agree with each other in them, and there definitely were disagreements in them, I think, yeah, we got on quite well. And yeah, party political differences aside, I think we shared a lot of values, as I think we all do in this chamber. And I just wanted to pass on my and our group's condolences to his family and friends. Rest in peace.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Richard Shaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, Peter's it's a great loss to us all. He was the first Lord Mayor that I, served under, as it were, when I was elected in 2014, and he was always very fair and very welcoming inside and outside of the chamber. A true gentleman, as everyone has already said, and to lose Peter this year after losing Pat is a even greater loss to Sheffield and to the council. One of my most abiding memories of Peter and Pat was actually at Peter's Lord Mayor's dinner, and I happened to be sat at a table surrounded by Labour councillors, including councillors Fox and Curtin, and with Pat and Don next to me, and Pat spent the entire evening calling me Edward. I said, why do you keep calling me Edward? He said, oh, I'm sorry, you just look like an Edward. And I can't, when I just think back, it just, I just go to bits just thinking about that. I mean, they're both just such wonderful people, and a true loss to this chamber. And I think, we can all just, remember them as best we can. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Councillor Peter Price.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I lost so many people in this last 12 months, 2 years, so many comrades and friends. It's quite a shock, and probably the least expected of all was Pete. I mean, it was such a shock when we lost Pat. I mean, I'd been chatting to Pat in the town hall 3 weeks earlier, and the similar with Pete Rippon. I was sat in his front room 3 weeks before he died, not realising he was that ill. I mean, he was going to see the neurologist on the following day, and anyway, while he was having difficulty walking, never dreamed he was so ill. I mean, Pete was more than just a council colleague to me. He's a friend, a pal, and we worked together for 13 years when he represented Shire Green Brightside with me, and he covered my back many times, as most of my colleagues tend to have to do. And of course, he's more than a friend. He's a real friend. He came to my birthday, as Shaunette said, up in the Lake District, and I dragged him up haystacks. Now, anybody's climbed haystacks, no, it's a tough mountain, but in the snow in February, we got to the top fine. It was dark when we got back, and he got back, and he kept his lovely smiley face as usual. He says, "Thank you for inviting me. Please don't do it again." I've left out the swear words, but it was a good. And after that, we had a few pints, we had a good laugh, and it was a brilliant gentleman. He was a gentleman, a man of integrity and honesty. And when he moved to Richmond, it was a very sad parting for us all. He actually bought me a mug and Pat, and this is it here, with all our pictures on together. And he said, "A great Labour team." And then he sent me this lovely card. Said, "Peter, many thanks for 13 great years as part of a great Labour team. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to work with you, Peter." Well, it was a great privilege for me to work with Pete. And as I say, we did lots together, and he was so fit. I mean, he could leave me standing delivering leaflets. He'd be around that street twice as fast when I was shaving someone else. And it was such a shock when he left us like that. And I mean, he went through a rocky time when he lost his wife, but but he came through that well. It's such a tragedy, a shock to his family, and indeed a shock to the council and the Labour group, because he's been one of the best whips we've had for a long time, actually, because everybody trusted him. Everybody knew he'd be honest. He was never meeting behind the scenes, behind people's backs. And I think we've lost a great bloke, and I'm very sad to lose him. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor David Baker.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I got quite a lot of things I was going to say, but you've all said it. Gentleman, integrity, kindness, smiling, all of the things that Peter was. I was honoured to have worked close with him because I was chief whip of my group, and whips' jobs are to work behind the scenes and find a way forward and solve problems that might get in the way of a council meeting. And we did it, and we did it mainly because of Peter. Peter, he was kind. He was a gentleman, but he was hard-nosed. If he got a point he wanted to make, or he wanted to so have some sticking points, I'll agree with that, but I'm not going past this. He made it very, very clear. He was a difficult man to negotiate with, but at the same time, he did it with such laughter and kindness. I shall always remember that man. I was very, very upset. I was upset when we lost Pat. I was close to Pat, and I just couldn't believe he'd gone. And I wanted to say all sorts of things, but you've all said it, and I shall miss him. I'm sure we'll all miss him, but I will really miss Peter. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, David. Councillor Jane Dunn.
Thank you. Thank you. Like everyone else, a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, but I just wanted to talk about how Pete was towards me. When I was quite poorly, he did nothing but tell me to stop work. And it was like, if you need any cover, love, don't do this, I'll do that. He couldn't have done any more to be supportive. He was so caring. And as a co-chair on planning, I couldn't have had a better colleague to work with. I mean, he just shared his knowledge. He never made a decision without working with you. I mean, he was just he was just absolutely wonderful. And I really, really feel that I've lost a really, really true friend. And while he was poorly, as Andrew was saying, the last time we saw him is when we went out to Stocksbridge Deep Car, wasn't it? And it was a really, really kind of contentious planning meeting that he was going to have. And I just can't believe he's not here, but we text each other regularly. And I had a text off him just a couple of days before he died. And it was just, thank you so much for messaging me all the time. I really appreciate it. I used to send him cards, paintings through the post, because I didn't know what else to do, because this pandemic meant that none of us could be with Pete and help him through his illness and help his family through. And he always ended his messages with stay safe. And I just want to end this with fly high, Pete, with Sue, and look over us, because you'll always be with us.
Thank you very much, Jane. And if anyone else wishes to speak, please let me know. But I would like just to say it's been wonderful to listen to all the tributes that you guys have put forward. It's clear, very clear, how much Peter will be missed by all of us in the council. And those heartfelt tributes mean so much to listen to. Words fail me as well. I miss him already. What a wonderful man he was. And thank you to everyone for contributing this evening. I've just seen something pop up with Jackie Drayton. Did you want to speak, Councillor Drayton?
No, it's all right. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to put something on the chat about, he was such a family man as well. He was so proud of his 4 children and, of course, Sue, his wonderful wife. And the thing I remember is he loved rock music. He loved rock music. He knew, he was like an encyclopedia, had encyclopedic knowledge of rock music and music. And I put in the thing, he was a real role model to young men about how you should behave as a man, if you know what I mean. And I remember at Sue's funeral talking to Richard Hawley, who called Pete sort of surrogate dad, you know what I mean? And he was saying he just had this way of being so much a person who young men wanted to emulate. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't just as a counsellor, but as a person. And I can't say anything about Pat and Pete. You know, I just can't believe it. We, as you said, Shafat, we started the year with losing Pat and we ended the year with losing Pete. But anyway, sorry, I just think it's just so upsetting. This pandemic is awful. But anyway, sorry, thank you. Sorry,
thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Denise Fox.
Thank you. I weren't going to speak, but because we've got time, I'd really like to. Pete was so lovely to me when I became Deputy Lord Mayor. I got thrown in at the deep end in lots of cases because Talib had a surprise pregnancy baby and often had to not attend things, and I'd get called up at the last minute and I'd ring Pete up and say, are you available, Pete? Because Terry isn't. And he came with me and at short notice, and there were times when I had to speak and I didn't have anything prepared because it was all short notice, and he'd like tap me and say, go on lass, you can do this, stand up, you can do it, and give me that encouragement. And so I had lots of memories about that. And then when I became Lord Mayor, he filled in with me again and was my consort at times and loved it. He loved being at the side of me and encouraging me. And I wanted to say a deep thank you to that because he really, really helped me. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for all your. I'll just be reading what Councillor Shafak's put on. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shafak. Thank you all for your contributions, and that, I'm afraid, that ends today's business. I'd like to wish you all a happy New Year, and we'll see you all. Is it February? Okay. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Goodbye to everyone. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Well, and
Stay safe.
Lord Mayor, goodbye.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.